my shirt's all creased. Half the battle in design is just like knowing where to start. Plus, there's no like straightforward process on how to go from like research to a prototype that you could show a client. So in this video, we're going to use Mobbin, which is a competitor research tool, to show you how you can do just that. Take competitor research, translate that research into designs in order to deliver a functional prototype. We're of course going to look at research, but we're also going to look at components, prototype quirks, and a whole bunch of other things as well. We're going to make plenty of mistakes along the way and really just iterate as we go. This is design chaos at its finest. Let's dive right in. But on a side note, like, I have a sponsor for this video. What? So I actually teamed up with Mobbin on this one. And Mobbin's a tool I generally use like every single day whenever I'm working with clients on design system projects or UX projects. It's basically one massive repository of every application that's out there, their designs, and their user flows. More on that later. And you can actually save 20% on the annual Mobbin plan using our UI Collective link down below. We also just released new content in UI Collective Academy, so be sure to check that out. Link also in the description. Look at this sun shining on me. What a great start to the video. Okay, so before we get into Mobbin and start looking for a lot of like the competitors, like, or inspiration from a lot of competitors and sort of the personal finance budget space, one thing I always like to do is I like to ask Chat GPT, especially if I'm starting fresh, okay, what types of data, what types of widgets would go on something like a dashboard and also a bottom navigation, because it's going to inform my search. So I know what it is that I'm looking for. And one thing we're going to see is on Mobbin, there's 1,000,002 different screens of competitors. So sometimes you can get lost in the sauce, but by conducting like asking Chat GPT the types of data that should go on the page is going to help me sort of focus my search a little bit more. Okay. So what types of data and widgets would go on the dashboard for a personal finance or personal budget app? Let's go personal budget app, not finance. So personal budget app. Okay, so current balance, cash flow, budget versus actual, upcoming bills due, top spending category, savings and goals, debt overview, recent transactions. Like, this is pretty good. Okay, so then we got some recommended widgets, interactions, layout tips. Perfect. So what about the bottom navigation? Okay, let's see what it comes back with. So dashboard, transactions, budget. So maybe set up like different types of budgets. Maybe you're spending for something specific. And again, that gets into goals as well. Perfect. I think this is pretty good. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take these, sort of start to categorize them in Figma into different sections to organize our research before we get into a lot of like the building of the UIs. Okay, so basically what I did here is I just took screenshots from what it is that ChatGPT gave us. Now, if we think about the core tab layouts that it gave us, what I always like to do is I like to structure my research by just having sections for each of those key tabs. So we might have like our home, our dashboard, we're gonna have our transactions, and then we also have budgets and goals and savings. So if we look at budgets, it's create and monitor monthly annual budgets, category spend alerts, and then goals and savings, like setting up savings goals. It's not going to be an investing app where like if we contribute X amount up front and then X amount monthly, like what could that be at retirement? I don't want to do that. So more around like budget, goals or savings targets that you want to hit. Transactions, budgets, and then goals and savings. And then it also gave us like a profile as well. We're not going to get into that, I don't think. So maybe we'll stick with the 4. And then if we look at what it is that it gave us, or sort of the key elements that we want to have on that dashboard, or like that homepage itself, is let me just add a little ellipse over the ones that I like. So like a spending progress ring. And this is really what I'm going for, like sort of the look that I want, sort of like a nice clean, pie chart around like how much I've spent already this month or this year versus how much I still have left to spend. So I like that. Cash flow timeline, daily inflow, outflow. I think it's not bad. So maybe we'll just set this as sort of like an orange for now. Maybe we'll come back to it. Oh, where's my orange? There we go. Like an orange for now. Goal tracker cards. I think this could come in handy. Upcoming bills carousel list, that's also super important. A category heat map or pie chart. I think maybe that might go a little bit better with like the budgets. So again, maybe we'll backlog it for now. Maybe, sorry, let's bring this down. Net worth snapshot, combining assets and liabilities. This is not what we're going for in terms of this application. So we're going to set that as red. And then, in alerts or insights, always something that's good to have. Quick add transaction or button. Now, this is really good because if we think about like a personal finance or spending app, maybe your transactions are linked to your existing bank accounts. Maybe they're not. So some type of quick actions could be really important, like add an expense, add, an additional payment. So that's good. And then a recurring subscription tracker, like what kinds of things are upcoming. I think this is also good as well. But this here would go beyond just add transactions. So more like quick actions. Quick actions is more in line with what we're looking for. So again, never just give what Chat GPT gives you. Always be sure to go through and do a little bit of an audit. So based off that, we sort of have an idea in mind as to what we're looking for this homepage. And again, a lot of the treatments and inspiration that we find for the homepage might also come in handy when we're looking at things like our transactions, our budgets, and our goals and savings. So what you're going to find is as when you're on Mobbin doing research, is you're actually going to be doing like research for your home, but at the same time, you might pull inspiration for things like transactions and everything else. It's not always just a linear process. Okay, so now that we have that sort of out of the way, so we know what it is that we're building, let's switch over to Mobbin and start doing a lot of that competitor research. Okay, so here we are within Mobbin. If you've never used Mobbin before, it's really just a repository of every app screen that's out there. They also have sites as well. So it's not just specific to mobile apps. Now, like I use Mobbin every day. Okay. I genuinely do. I used it last year. I used it 6 months ago. And whenever I'm working on a UX project for a client or for myself, or even a design system project for a design system client, which I have many of those, I come in here, I look for inspiration, not just on UX flows, but different treatments of componentry. Like they have specific sections for drop-down menus and banners, where if you're designing a banner, want to find great examples, you no longer need to go through Dribble and see a bunch of like overly complex designs. You can come in here and see how competitors are doing it in there every day. Okay. So as an example, like if I want to see what Airbnb was doing, first one I saw there, I can come in here and see exactly what Airbnb is doing with their design. Whereas in the past, what I would have to do is just like go onto my phone, download the app, go through the entire process, try to figure out what was happening. I wouldn't be able to get through some flows, but I could some others. And then I'd have to like take screenshots of the screens, upload it to Slack, download it on Slack, and download it from Slack, then bring it into Figma on my laptop. Now I can come here and it's just a repository of all the screens. Okay. So when we're doing this type of research, getting started on a project where we don't really have much background knowledge on, it's a great place to start, and even have it broken out by flows too. So if I'm looking for something specific like experiences view, I can come in here and see that specific flow. So I genuinely use this tool every day, and I recommend that you do too. Okay, now let's get started actually looking at our competitors that we're going to use to inform our budgeting app or personal finance app. So I'm going to come up to the search here, and under categories, again, you can see what's trending, but under categories, we're going to select finance. Okay, so when you select finance, one thing you can do is filter by individual like screens as well, like with a chart screen, whether specific UI elements or also specific flows. Now, one thing you can do whenever you're doing research is, again, you can just come here and browse. But my suggestion to you is know what it is that you're looking for. Make a real targeted search, and it's going to save you time. So as I search finance, I'm also going to search charts, because if we think about our personal finance app, sorry, let me refresh my memory with what it is that we had at the top, like a spending progress ring with a circular chart showing % of monthly budget use, right? So I want to come and find examples specific to that. Everything else can be a little bit secondary for now, okay? Focus on element by element. Trust me, it's going to make your life easy. Okay, so as I'm scrolling through here, this treatment's not bad. I think it might be a little bit too complex for where we want to go today. I'm really just taking a browse here. I'm going to see what's coming up. And right away, one thing that I see here is I see this Origin screen. Origin and Eubank look pretty promising so far. So I like this here. So I'm going to click into Origin and just see what's going on. Okay, so I have some sort of inspiration here that I really like. So I'm going to take some screenshots of these. Again, this one's for asset allocations, so a little bit different than budget, but it looks like this one here is specific to budget itself. So it looks like they have expenses, budget, and income, which is not a bad way to actually break up a lot of that information. So I'm going to scroll down here and see if I can find those 3 cards all together here. Again, this here I also like this kind of treatment. So just taking examples, screenshots of things, of different treatments that you like. A few moments later. So I think we're in some pretty good shape for sort of that first piece of the dashboard. So I'm going to pause here and I'm going to start grabbing some more inspiration. So before we flip back to Mobbin, one thing I've done here is within sort of the home category that we've created is I've gone through and created sections for the elements that we're going to get some of that inspiration from. So for things like spending progress, what are some inspirations specific to that widget? We're also going to look at goals on the dashboard as well. And then I also always have a section for general dashboard inspiration. Whenever I'm working with clients, okay, is they're going to ask to know what dashboard competitors you looked at, but then also at the individual widget as well, okay? Because sometimes there might be good widget inspiration for competitors that don't have an overall great dashboard. You know, like it's kind of, they're not always one and the same. So whenever you're starting out with a client project, you're working on a portfolio, you're doing a case study for a job interview, start to structure your Figma files this way, where you have sort of the overall category for like your home or like your dashboard. Then you have sections for the individual widgets, and then also a general inspiration section as well. So now with that preamble out of the way, again, where I just uploaded all the screenshots that I took to the spending progress, because that was the widget that we were getting inspiration for. Let's now look at the next section, which is sort of that goal tracker cards. Things like upcoming bills, like a carousel list, alerts, and insights. I think that can sort of be captured in sort of like a general dashboard inspiration as long as we know what we're looking for. But let's just grab some inspo for goal trackers for now. Okay, so now with goals, what we're going to do, again, still under the finance category, just under screen, search goal and task. And let's see any treatments that come up. Right away there, we had this Eubank money one, and they had a great treatment there, whatever it was that I just saw it. So like your target kind of thing. So I'm going to take a screenshot of this here, like your targets. So-and-so, like a thing like a savings target, like how much you might want to save over X amount of time. I don't know, something like that. In and out, these are some pretty good treatments, actually, like if you want to see a little bit more. So, you know what, I'm actually just going to screenshot this for now. Again, we don't always need to go super linear in terms of screens. If something pops up to you, just take a screenshot and just save it for later. This is kind of cool here. If we think about like maybe like adjusting that goal, I think this could be kind of like a good treatment for like how much you want to save, how much you want to, you know, save after like five months or something like that. So let's take a screenshot of that. I think maybe we've sort of ran through this one already. Okay, so let's go back and see what other options we have. So this is kind of like a small goal. I'm not too sure if I'm a big fan of that. Let's see if else comes out. Sometimes you might need to look a little bit more in depth than anything else. So this is kind of like a goals index page. So you might have multiple goals that you want to save for. So we'll take a screenshot, maybe get some inspiration. A few moments later. Okay, perfect. So now let's switch back to Figma, organize some of that competitor research. Now we're going to start actually doing the designing. Okay, so by now we have just screens in these different sections here. And again, save these screens because if a client ever asks to see them or you ever need to reference them again, you know, you can know exactly where to look. So what I do now is instead of having to go through here and, you know, sort of have to keep looking at what screens I like in reference to, is, let me move my video bar out of the way, is I always sort of put a bounding box around the items that I'm getting the most inspiration from. So you can put it red, you can put it green, you can put it whatever. So right away, some of the inspiration that I like here is this treatment. Although it's not specifically on a dashboard, but it's almost like a secondary internal navigation that's going to allow us to sort of have maybe an overview and then click into your expenses and also your income. Okay, not a bad treatment. I like that. Let's maybe set it to like a vibrant green or something like that for now. Okay, what I also like is this. We've also covered. This is also another treatment for some type of breakdown. Okay, so let me highlight this here. I think these are from the same app, but that's totally fine. I also do like this treatment here, where it might also be used for something like goals. It's kind of similar treatment for something you might usually see there. And then also I do like how big these are at the top, gets your attention right away, in your face, and also it's another type of like secondary navigation here. Perfect. So other things as well, in and out, maybe we'll come back to that right now. I'll come back to that a little bit later. But let's keep moving forward. And then for our goals, I know we didn't have a whole lot for the goals, but the one that really stood out to me here was just this treatment right here, kind of similar to what we saw before. And then we also did have these goal index pages. So these might launch out from the dashboard, saying a little bit more about your goal, adding to your goal, playing around with sort of what that spending goal is. And the other option that I did really like here as well, or that I don't think that should be in here, that's squeezed in, is this right here. So that also shouldn't be in there. Sorry, I think I've added these to the wrong spot. But anyways, we're going to continue on. And then for sort of general dashboard information, this here, great treatment. I think this might be in line with kind of where we're going for, where this is similar to Revolut. We have that big, beautiful top bar, and then you have sort of like the secondary navigation, but we also still do have that bottom navigation as well. Other things that I like, Klarna all has some really good stuff. So this sort of ties in good dashboards, quick actions, goal tracking, money spent, things like that. And also Neo Financial too is also pretty good, but we'll stick with Klarna for now. Okay. So that's usually the process that I go through whenever before I start designing. Okay. I bring in screenshots. I sort of mark off the ones I'm going to take the most inspiration from. And then from there, I know exactly where I pulled a lot of this data from. So if a client asks to see it, I know exactly where I can find it. Okay. So with that out of the way, now let's actually start doing the designing. Okay. So we're going to move widget at a time, going down the dashboard. Now, one thing I'd like to call out is if like we had more time, maybe we might build out sort of like an information architecture, or also just like a user flow for all the screens that we want to build out. Again, you would do that in best practice. And maybe what we do at the end of this is we just go through and build those out together. Maybe we'll do that, I think. But for now, we're going to keep the emphasis on the actual designing. Yeah, I'm not too sure how far we're going to go and actually building out the full application itself. Okay, I know you're here to use Figma to do that. So that's what we're going to focus on for now. The other elements we can focus on a little bit later on. But of course, an actual project, you'd likely want to start out with some of those information architecture diagrams, those user flows and journey maps and stuff like that. Okay, so I just have like this iPhone 16 frame here, and we're going to focus on the spending progress ring to start. Now, I also just grabbed this from the Apple iOS kit. And in terms of the variables that I'm going to be using, so the text styles and the variables, they're coming from the collective kit, which is like our design system. It's included in our academy. Again, I actually have a video where I walk you through how we actually build out the library for this. So if you do want to follow along, you can watch that video. It's called our design system setup video. I'll put a link for that in the description. But we're not going to build out that variable library together now. Okay. So what we're going to do to start is I like the look and feel of this at the top, but I kind of like these graphs and these treatments a little bit better. Okay. So we're going to start off with that. So what I'm actually thinking here is that for this top bar is we're going to have this treatment of the tabs, just because I think it looks like pretty good here. Just looks a little bit cleaner and more my style. And also these types of graphs. Okay. Where we sort of have like the sort of separation between elements. I think it's a little bit more like futuristic, but one thing we're going to do is we're going to take the inspiration from this full card here. Whereas when you open the app, it's a little bit more like in your face. Okay. Kind of similar also to like what we saw with Revolut, where it's just like in your face altogether. Okay. So maybe what I can also do is bring the Revolut example down too. And maybe there we go. Okay. So that's some of the inspiration that we're pulling from. Now, what we're going to start off by doing is actually building out the tabs. Okay. Now I do have a tab component as part of the collective kit, but we're not going to be using that. I got feedback from the last video I did on this, where people would like to see if I just built even just small examples of the components. So we're going to do that one by one. Okay. So we're going to have start off building our tabs, then we're going to build out the graphs, then put them into this overall widget. So in terms of these tabs here, okay, so I move my video bar out of the way, is we're just going to build a component here, right here. So let's go maybe like overview, okay? And for this, we're going to be using our body medium. And again, go ahead and watch our video where we actually build out these styles, and also our text body, okay? And let's just simply go ahead and also just add an auto layout frame here. And then, oops, our text style did not get applied. So this should be our text body. Sorry about that. And let's go ahead and just call this our tab and create the component of this, or tab item. So let's go ahead, add a variant here. And we're going to have our status, which is going to be our unselected. And then this here is going to be our selected. So what we're going to do for both actually is let's add a stroke just on the bottom, okay? And this is going to be our border defaults, but our selected is actually going to become our border default, and we're set that border width to 2 pixels. So you have one that's selected and one that's not selected. Now, one thing we can also do for the one that is selected, we can set it to a semi-bold, and maybe set this one to like a text caption, so it is a little bit lighter. Again, I'm not too sure if I'm the biggest fan of that. Like if we were to check this out specifically here, sort of how you can see how we have our tab bar coming together now. I think that's okay. We might pivot a little bit later on. But let's just bring it into a frame. I'm just going to remove auto layout from this frame for now, just so I can drag it around and just like play around with some of the different treatments. So, oh, come on. Let me extend this out. There we go. And if I was to set each of these to fill, I think that's good. Maybe one thing we might want to do is actually just set it to not our body large, but maybe like our body medium, semi-bold. Oops, not our H6. Sorry, our body medium, semi-bold, and our body medium. I think that sizing might just be a little bit better, and I believe that's like 14 pixels. Yeah, I think it just looks a little bit cleaner that way. Okay, so I think we're in some pretty good shape for sort of that initial tab bar component. One thing I want to do now is start to play around with maybe something at the top, and then also, again, building out these graphs right here. Okay, so we have a tab bar out of the way, and if we use the same treatment here where we have like expenses, budget, and income, maybe the first one would be something like, you know, your overview, and then you have your expenses, and then you also have, you know, your income as well. So I'm actually going to create the component of this. I'm just going to call this our tab nav or tab bar, and just bring out an instance there just so we have sort of that base component if we ever need to change it. Okay. So, and let's set this one to selected, and then this one to unselected to start. So if we think about sort of our overview, this might be where we have sort of this initial budget right here. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's build out just a real sample sort of half circle, something like this. Okay. Where what I always do is I always add an ellipse, and then I bring in an arc. I arc it out just like that. And then what I do is I adjust the ratio on the inside. Okay, I'm going to do that one more time for you. So I'm going to add an ellipse, bring this in, adjust the arc very slightly. Now, one treatment that they seem to do is they like, it sort of goes, it's not a full half circle, but it sort of goes a little bit beyond. Maybe we might bring that back a little bit later. I don't know. But set it to half, and then on the inside, adjust the ratio of that. With me so far? Perfect. Then what I do is I just set like the radius here to something like 99, sort of create like that look that we're going for. And this is maybe I want to experiment at sort of bringing it down. No, never mind. Sorry. And then what I do is I copy one, and I paste it on top of the other. So you can see how on this left-hand side here, we have the 2 ellipses. Oops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. And then what I do is I take the second ellipse and I adjust it. So now we have 2 of these different ellipses. So I'm going to set this one to our surface secondary, and then this one here to our surface default. And again, how I build out these libraries, it's already on YouTube. You can go ahead and take a look at that. Okay. So that's basically how I structure some of these initial elements to start. Okay, so you can see now if I was to bring this in, we kind of already have sort of like things are starting to come together a little bit with me so far. Maybe if I set this something a little bit darker just for now, I might just adjust this ratio even more just to make it a little bit thinner. I think that's sort of more the look that I'm going for, so that nice clean look. And maybe too, we'll set this like our default subtle, something like that. Okay, so now you can see how some of these pieces are coming together. Now, let's keep moving forward and building out sort of the rest of the treatment where we might have some of these elements in the middle before we go ahead and look at sort of like those circle graphs. So one thing I'm actually going to do real quick is like, I want to see the sizes that I kind of want, because I want it to be sort of like big in your face, because what we're going to do here is we're going to inverse it. Sorry, I'm a little sick, coughing. Where if we have this at a background, we might have like this might be kind of like your surface defaults. Everything's going to be inversed on top of it. Where for now, if I was just like set these to like a dark mode, you'd be able to see sort of the look and feel that we're going for. Again, the reason why that dark mode works, they have it set up inside our base variables kit. Okay, so we might have something like this. We're going to have some text in the middle where you can toggle through your overview, your expenses, and also your income. Okay, so let me just undo all of that. But anyways, where was I going with this? Sort of the size that we're looking for. Okay, so 320, maybe we'll just make it sort of the 330. I think that's pretty good. One thing that does worry me though is that maybe the graphs might be a little bit too small. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Okay, so let's bring this in. So let's set this to 330. Oops, sorry, let's not do it that way. If with these here should be set to scale and also to scale. So let's just set this to 330 by 330, and then things scale accordingly. Now, one thing we're going to want to do is set this maybe to like a surface success default, so you have like that nice green that comes with it. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's create the component of this half circle. Now, one reason you might want to create a component is for different like progress types. So like progress this here is maybe like 30%. This here might be 20%, right? Where you sort of adjust that, or then a user could toggle between 30% or 20% on the UI. That's an option as to why you might want to create the component, but I just don't know if we want to make some changes to this a little bit later on, because I don't really know where we're going with this design, if I'm honest. Okay, so let's bring out a half circle now. And then if we look back to sort of the example that they have here, I'm kind of regretting it, making it so big, but anyway, so we're going to continue on with it, is they sort of have these metrics on the inside. Personally, I'm not a fan where we have like the 3. I think it looks a little bit messy, but I kind of like the 760, 3,000 budget, 760 spent this month. Sort of the 2 lines. So I'm actually going to set this to like a 760. Now, the question you're probably wondering is like, Kirk, what if like they have an $850,000 budget out of like a $10 million budget? If that's you, you're probably not using this kind of app. Okay, so I think these smaller numbers will work just fine. So if we just set this to, maybe we'll go with an H4 semi-bold. Let's bring it in, see if it works. Sorry, I know it might be hard to see on the backgrounds. Let's actually just set the whole background to white. We can set this to maybe like an H. Close this. Too many windows now. I don't know why they would not close. But let's go with an H2 semi-bold. I think that's fine. And then maybe underneath it, we can go with like a body large semi-bold, or we'll go with H6 semi-bold. I think that's fine. So then this here would be like $3,000 budget. $3,000 budget. And okay, so that's decent for sizing. So one thing we're going to want to do is just add some auto layout between these elements and just set them both to hug and hug to keep them nice and snug. Okay, so then we can set any gap here to something like 4. And then this here can become our text headings. And then this will become our placeholder. So our text placeholder, or maybe even captions. This is a little bit darker. I want to call this our metric. Okay, so let's create the component of this now. So we're sort of combining components here in order to build the graph that we're going for, right? So we have an instance there, but now there's a couple properties that we can add here because maybe we don't want to show the second row. So we can add a layer property here for budget. or row 2, row 2, and we can also add a text property for row 2. And because we don't have, we can't have two properties with the same name, we just add a little downward arrow to show that one is inside the other. So now on this here, if I was to turn this on and off, something's broken there. Let's see what's going on. So this is set to hug and hug. This here is also set to hug and hug. So one thing I would do is I'm actually just going to place this inside of a frame. It doesn't need to be an auto layout wrapper. But if I show row 2, there we go. I think we're in a decent spot there. Beautiful. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to call this like our progress or half circle progress. I don't know, it doesn't really matter. And then let's create the component of this. Now, one thing you can also do if you really wanted to is you can add some auto layout in here, and then you just have to, best practice would probably be just to absolute position this if you really want to. Again, there's a bunch of different things that you can do there, but we're rule breakers here, so we're not going to do that. And you can even extend this out to give yourselves a little bit more space if we want to. Just make sure that it's in the center. And then there we go. So let's bring this into our UI and see how it looks here. So let's bring it in. There we go, $760 with a $3,000 budget. One thing I noticed is I think it's just too big, the text right away. So let's shrink it down. It's like an H3. And then this here can be a body large, semi-bold. I think it looks already like a little bit cleaner, but I think even still too, maybe we might want to go with like an H4 semi-bold and a body medium semi-bold. Something like that. Now it's just way too tight. Let's revert back. We'll keep it the one size up. There we go. I don't think that looks that half bad. Again, we might come back and shrink it a little bit later on. But one thing we're going to do is just send this to back and let's sort of test how this might look here, where if we add a dark mode, we can see that it's not that half bad. I think it looks a little bit futuristic. And let's set this to white. There we go. I don't think it's that half bad in the grand scheme of things. Okay. So I think we're in some half decent shape here. Maybe we might also want to add a little bit more space for any like items below that we might want to add in the future. But I think we're in a pretty decent spot here. And again, you can see how things are starting to come together. So now that we have our half circle progress out of the way, one thing we can also do is just add any nested instances to turn on any properties that we set before. So now when we hit this once, we have access to all those great properties that we had just built. Okay. So, sorry, getting a little sick. So now that we have that initial one out of the way, so that would be for something like an overview. Then let's go ahead and maybe look at what did they do here for things like expenses, and then also maybe for income in and out. So one thing as well that I just did real quick behind the screens, I actually just set it to 256. I know I had it set to 330 before, but it's going to give us a little bit more breathing room, I think, especially once we get into some of the larger widgets here too. Okay, so that's just something I did behind the screens. Now, I know my components are a little bit of a mess right now. We'll come back and organize those a little bit later. Well, one thing I want to focus on now is sort of this look, where we sort of have all of these different items. Again, maybe one for expenses, and then maybe also another one for like income, something like that. I don't know. So what we can do is we can take the same process that we had down here, where we're going to go ahead and add in an ellipse. Okay. And what we're going to do is just go around and just shrink it. So just shrink it just like that and get it nice and thin. Okay. So I forget the ratio that we had here. It was like 50 to 90%. Okay, so this one's at 90%. Perfect. And then we can just rejoin these together. Okay, so that's sort of serve as sort of like the background if we need it, right? Now what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to copy and paste. So you'll see here in the layers now I have ellipse 13 and ellipse 12. And then this is where we can start to like play around with some of those legend pieces. So if I was to bring this down and crop this out for a reference, there we go. Maybe this one here might be, let me go just in our brand collection here. We might have like a 700, and then we can collapse this in, and then we can copy this one here and then we can adjust the color, adjust sort of like the location of it. Maybe this one here is sort of like that 600. Now, one treatment that I like is sort of how they have the gap in between. I think that looks pretty good. So how you achieve that is, there's a couple different ways that you can do it, is you kind of add a stroke, but make it like 5 pixels and set it to border, whatever the color of the background border is going to be. So as an example, right now, our border is on color, is white. So we're going to set it to sort of that white border and then set it on the outside. So now you can see there's that differentiation. But one thing too is they sort of have like this radius. So maybe if we set this to something like 8, I think that even still might be a little bit too big. So maybe like 2, even like 4. Yeah, there we go. There it sort of achieves the look that we're going for. Okay. So basically what I do is I just simply just keep copying these, set it to like a different color inside of one of our collections. Maybe this one here is a purple. And then maybe this one here. And again, the color combination, I don't know if it's going to look like the best at the end of the day. And then this here can maybe be like I don't know. We'll set this to something like where's a green or emerald. I forget what color my greens were in here. Maybe this is like a 600, something like that. And yeah, let's make sure to just add the same border treatment on the outside. How many? We had it set to 5. So let's set this to also 5. And then white. So this will be like our border on color. There we go. And then lastly, of course, we're going to need that radius if we had set something like 4. Okay, so there's sort of how we can achieve that treatment. Now, I see it's set to 256, and these are set to 327. So I'll set this to 256 and 256. Okay, there we go. I think we're in some decent shape. So we can now frame this selection, call this our expenses. Circle. And there we go. I think we're now in some half decent looking shape here. And one thing too, that's always best practice, just select all the ellipses and set them to scale and also scale. So as you like sort of extend this up, what's going to happen is like the circles are going to extend with it. We just need to maybe just adjust the radius. Okay. But again, 256, 256. And if we bring this inside of our graph here, again, I know the borders doesn't look great because it's white, but if we set it sort of that blacker background, you can see so it has sort of that differentiation to it. Okay. So there we go. I think we're in some half decent shape here. Now, one thing you can also do is just re-leverage the exact same metric component that you had before and simply just paste it in, and then simply just, frame this, set our metric in the middle, and then also in the middle, and then we can call it our expenses circle progress. There we go. And then we can create the component of this. And then there we go. I think we're in some decent shape. And one thing too that we also might like to have as an option is just the option to hide the metric altogether. So we can just set our content. So now here I have the option simply just to hide that content if I like. Again, just an option. Okay, so I think we're in some pretty decent shape. I think there's only maybe one graph that we have left to do, which we might just simplify it a little bit, which is that income graph. So then what we can do for our income is we can just take this, detach it, maybe just simplify the number of colors that we have here. So you might only have 3 in this case. And what we can do is simply just change these colors to something else, flip them around, get maybe make this green like a little bit lighter, maybe make this one here like maybe a lighter color or something like that. Actually, I don't know if I'm the biggest fan of that. Let's set this to something like, where's our lime? I think I called it maybe like a darker green, something like that. Because if we think about income coming in, I don't know, then maybe this one here is just like much lighter, something like that. And the way that they had referenced it up here is earned this month. And then what we can do is just call this our income. There we go. And away we go. So Sorry, I actually broke a golden rule there that I shouldn't have done. I should detach this, make this a component, excuse me. This is our income circle, and then create the component of this, and then bring this out. And then we can bring our metric inside. Again, be sure to frame it, set our metric to, there we go, in the middle. There we go. Maybe just change the number to something like 2600, if I can spell that right, 2600. And then this is our income progress circle. If I can spell progress right. There we go. So now if we were to create the component of this, oops, 256, 168, I think I touched something there. There we go. Then what we can do is we can create the component of this, and now we have that income circle. Okay, so now we sort of have the foundations of sort of our graphs that's going to make up sort of like what this card here is going to look like. Sorry, I know the screen is a little bit of a mess right now. We're going to come back and clean it up a little bit later. But now what we want to do is we're going to want to start off with like build out the rest of the spending progress ring card, right? Because each of these are going to have an element associated with it. You know, overview might have a different appearance. Expenses might have a different appearance when expenses is selected, and then unselected. And then this here might have a different appearance. And you're going to want to showcase what is under each of these when you go ahead and what's the word that I'm looking for? Like showcase of what, if I was to toggle between these tabs on the actual application, how does that experience maybe change? Do the legend pieces differ? Like that kind of thing. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to set up the componentry, like the interactive componentry, so we can pull the component in here all at once without needing separate screens. Okay, let's keep going. Now, sorry, I know I changed. I had to go somewhere. But one thing I want to cover, and I actually did this on purpose, is a lot of junior designers, especially those getting started in the design realm, what they tend to do is they tend to pack everything on a dashboard. And if we go back and we look at this example, notice how this is not on a dashboard. It's on something like an insights page, right? So what a lot of designers will tend to do is if they have a dashboard here, okay, let's just call this like hello Kirk, you know, set this to like an H3 just as an example, H3 semi-bold, or sorry, like an H4. And I did this on purpose because it was something that I've been trying to teach for a while. I was just thinking like, how can I possibly bake it in? So if this is here as like a dashboard, now all of a sudden, is it almost information overload on the dashboard? Because I have my overview, I can view my expenses, I can view my income, and now we have all this other stuff at the same time that we're going to want to include. Now, if you have Mobbin, I would take a look at Wealth Simple because they're really, really good at simplicity. And it's something that a lot of designers aren't that great at. And like even myself too, I still struggle with it. Now, I want to go through a quick lesson that I've learned working in sort of the financial sector in the past, working with larger applications, and it sort of helps guide me whenever I'm doing some designing. So it's sort of like a concept that I've sort of been taught throughout the years. Let's switch over to Figma slides. I want to review that with everyone. So something I've learned when building out larger complex applications is sort of like how users like to think, and it helps inform what I should put on the dashboard. And it all goes around the question of, am I okay? Especially if we're working within, you know, things like personal finance, you know, fitness. Am I on track? Am I okay? A user opens up the application. That's all they care about. They don't really care about anything else. So users want to glance at an instant and see how they're doing. So good rule of thumb is don't pack too much into a dashboard. So what I always like to do is where some of those more secondary pieces of information are. And if you think about sort of like the expenses and income, that is more secondary pieces of information. If this is a budgeting application, I just want to know if I'm on track with my budget or not. So we'll have the dashboard with higher level information, but put that secondary data on those secondary pages and still allow them to drill down. Okay, so like look at it as if it's a triangle, dashboard at the top, they can drill down and give them an easy access to do so. So with that lesson out of the way, with the widgets that we just built, let's think about how we can maybe separate out the secondary pieces of information from the primary pieces of information to make the dashboard nice and smooth, but still make the experience meaningful for if they still have questions off of if they're on track or off track, they can dive a little bit deeper into what that means. So if we switch back to our app, what's the most important piece of the dashboard that we have so far? It's how close am I to my end budget? This expenses and income can come elsewhere, right? So we're still going to use the widgets that we just created, but I wanted to go through this lesson with everyone here around like structuring data and thinking about data and not overwhelming users on a dashboard. Because if this here is a dashboard, what we can also have is what's like an insights page, where maybe we do have a little bit more in-depth information on like the overview, the expenses, and also the income, so they know what is like consisting of this overall budget. But if I'm a user opening up the application and just coming in here and checking what's going on, really all I want to know, am I close to my end budget, or do I still have some room to spend this month? Okay, so we're going to have a dashboard page, and we're also going to have an insights page too, to house some of that secondary data. Now, again, if we were in an actual like enterprise setting here, what we would probably do is we'd probably map this out and figure this out long in advance, right? But again, you watching me design, I want you to see like the process that I would go through if I was just doing this for a client project. So we're going to have an insights page that we're going to get to. And then we're going to have this dashboard page. This insights page is going to house a lot more of the detailed information that I think we saw up here with this example. But the dashboard page itself might be a little bit more focused on maybe just one metric, which still tying in some of these goal pieces in order to give it a little bit more of a lightweight experience. So now that we have that preamble out of the way, we're sort of how we're going to separate some of the secondary piece of data from the dashboards, keep moving through the dashboard widgets. Okay, so still focusing on our dashboard for now. Again, still on the premise of opening up the application. How am I doing? Am I on track, off track? What is the most key piece of information that I need to know? So, hello, Kirk. Right away, looks like you're on track. Stay within your budget this month. Stay within the budget this month. Let's set this to like a body large, medium, something like that. And let's set this like our text, I don't know, body or something. Okay. So hello, Kirk. We'll remove a comma. Looks like you're on track to stay within your budget this month. Okay. Let's add some auto layout between these. Make sure that this is set to hug. And this here is also set to hug. And let's go ahead and set this to something like 14 or 12 or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Okay. So then I can see my budget. So I can see $760 was spent out of my $3,000 budget. Now, right? So let me make sure that these are all centered too. And let's add some auto layout between these. Now, one thing that's important to know, okay? So I open the application. I see exactly what's going on. Then what can I take action on, right? And going back to the triangle, that taking action can be like viewing additional insights that might be relevant. So I see a lot of instances where, you know, you might have like card here, and then you have like quick actions like all the way down here. And I think I saw a good example in like some of the research that we did. Let me go back and see if I can find it real quick, that I found is just like a little bit of a weird experience. It quite makes sense to me. Anyways, I saw it somewhere, and I see it a lot of time in like different client apps that I'm working with, is then they have quick actions all the way down here. Quick actions all the way down here. Now, if you have to scroll all the way down to get to your quick actions, are they quick actions? No, they are not. And even look like what Chat GPT said too is like quick add transaction button. And that suggests it closer to the bottom. I might thought is that it was trying to give these in order. But if you have quick actions at the bottom, it might just be easier to navigate to where you can get to those quick actions from like a sidebar or something. So not really quick actions. So what we're going to do is we're going to structure it in a way where we have some quick actions right here, one of which is going to lead to this insights page. So let's go ahead and just play around with the look that we're going for first. Like add transaction. Like maybe you spent something that you want to document that's maybe not part of like an automatic fee connected to like your bank account or something. So we're going to set this to fill, set this to like a surface default, and add a stroke, which is like a border default subtle. And we'll make this text way smaller too. And we're going to set this to maybe like a body small, size like 14. Might even be a little bit too small, but let's set this like our round radius. There we go. So, and this might just be too small. So let's go back to the medium and our text body. So just applying the basic styles, okay? So I can see I can add a transaction. So that's like the quick action, but then I can view insights. View insights. So what are the two key things that I might want to do? I might want to add a transaction, and I might want to view additional insights relating to my budget. Now, this quick action would take us to the insights page. We could dive a little bit deeper into the overview, the expenses, and also the income. See how I'm sort of structuring things a little bit. Again, this isn't perfect. I'm doing this like off the cuff. I just don't think it makes sense for me to design this big, beautiful application like beforehand, and then you watch me rebuild it, because you're sort of missing sort of the iteration and thought processes that I'm going through while I'm designing. Okay, so I know it's a little bit messy, but it's intentional. So let's set this to 12. And one thing, I think that the looks not too bad. So one thing I can do is just create the component and just call this like a quick action. Call this a quick action in case I want to make changes a little bit later. And then view insights. View insights. And then there we go. So set this to 12. Oops, 12, not 2. And then I think we are in some half decent shape. Okay, so I know I'm going to go back and add some auto layout. We're just getting the framework of everything down before we go ahead and do that. Okay, so what's one thing that we also want to build out? So we sort of have the, like, if we're on track or off track. We can even set this to like a caption to make things a little bit lighter. Now what we can do is let's move down the line and maybe look at like goal tracker cards, upcoming bills, carousel, any alerts and insights, sort of round out our dashboard a little bit, and we'll work on improving the UI as we do that. Okay, so next, if we think about like if it's a personal finance or like a budget app, is we might have the option to build out like specific savings goals that we're working towards. So you might want to set like a $3,000 budget in terms of what you're spending. Maybe you want to save for like vacation. Maybe you want to save for like a new laptop, like those kinds of sort of low level goals that users want to save for. So in terms of that, and also too, if you think about it, like what Chat GPT gave us, it also gave us like this goal of saving sort of at the bottom of, what's the word that I'm looking for? Like as part of like one of those navigation layouts. Okay, so as part of that, we kind of want to like feature that somewhere on the homepage, because there might be like a primary goal that users are working towards. So if we go back and look here, so I can see that we sort of have this example from sort of like that goals index page. So I think maybe what we can do is we can actually like leverage that same type of treatment here. I don't know, we'll organize things a little bit later on. Organize this treatment to, or recreate this card for something that we can almost like stick on our dashboard in terms of our goals with a link out to some of those goals. Okay, so for this, what we can do is really just try to recreate it. So we can go like saved, 15%. There we go. So we can bring it in here. And again, whenever I'm doing this, sometimes I just build the components inside the actual UIs as they are, because then I can make tweaks to them going along. We'll work on our progress bar in just a sec. S completion, Feb 7, 2032. Or we'll make it way quicker. 2026. It's kind of a long goal. And we can also maybe add in this type of treatment here as well. So I'm going to go into our assets panel. And again, just within the, what's the word I'm looking for? The design system that I have. So I am using material icons for this. So then we can do something like on track. And we can set these to maybe like our greens, might be like our text success. Text success default. This one could be like our icon success defaults. There we go. So let's select both of these and just make some adjustments here. Let's make sure this is set to hug, and we can set this something like 12, okay? And then another item that we have is sort of the total. So if in this case, maybe I'm saving for like a vacation. One thing we can do is, 875 out of $1,500, something like that. There we go. So I can see what's been saved. So now let's start doing some of the grouping here. So let's maybe actually just bring this down and let's start piecing everything together. Before we do that, we're going to want to build out our little progress bar. So whenever I'm building out my progress bar is I just start off add a rectangle and just set the radius to this to our round. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to then place this inside of a frame and just get rid of the inside. Sorry, I should have done that before, but this here is going to be our surface, maybe our secondary. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to take a frame and take it in. Oops. Come on, what's going on there? Okay, let me revert back. Sorry, we'll do it the hard way. I don't know why that wasn't working, but then what you can do is inside of that frame, simply just add in I can't see the background here. So this here is going to have our surface defaults. There we go. And set this to round. There we go. And then what we can do is we can take one of these in and just simply drag it in and also set the radius of this to round, like 1024. And we're just going to inverse it. So this will be our surface defaults. And then this here, our frame could be like our surface, default subtle to offer some differentiation. So sort of showing the progress that we have thus far. Okay. Again, I go into more in-depth lessons on building out a progress bar component on our academy or somewhere. But anyways, we're going to keep continuing on for now. And then we're just going to shrink it. Okay. So, and then this here can also just be shrunk too. It's be a little messy. Okay, so now we have sort of the rough foundation for what that bar might look like. Okay, so this one right here. So then what we can do is what happened here. So it looks like this got set to absolute position for some reason. So let's remove any auto layout here and set this to fill so that it takes the full shape of this container. And this can be set to hug and hug, and this also to hug. There we go. And now what we can do is let's just group all of these together. So let's bring this in, and you can see how it's starting to look pretty good. Things are coming together relatively well. One thing I do notice is that this here should be set to fill in order to take the full width of the parent container. And excuse me, let's add a fill here, set this to our surface defaults, and set the padding to something like 12 and also like 12. And we're going to give it a radius something like 12 as well. So let's create the component of this, and let's just call this like our goal. And let's bring it in here. Now we might also want some differentiation. So we can add like a border default subtle all the way around if we'd really like to. And one thing too, also that they have that I think is a pretty good treatment is sort of like savings goals, and then like view more, something like that. Add some auto layout. There we go. This is set to now these are set to hug and hug. Savings goals, view more. We can make these a little bit bigger. So maybe this is our body large, medium. There we go. And then we can also set this to something like our text defaults and set this maybe to our medium link. There we go. So like savings goals, view more. And you'll notice here that what's happening is it's not extending out. And the reason being is because this needs to be set to fill. There we go. So now when we extend it out, I think we're in some pretty good shape. Beautiful. So now we have our savings goals. Things are coming together a little well. I do think that it's a little bit too white of a page though. That to fill. So I think we might need to spruce it up with some color a little bit later. We're going to worry about that when the time comes. And what's added some other things that go. So we're building the rough framework for this. So next, let's look at sort of upcoming bills and sort of like a carousel list of sort of what's coming up so that I can plan for. Again, think about what's the most important pieces of information. I can see I'm on track or off track. How am I doing to maybe like a primary savings goal that I have? And then what's upcoming that I might need to base my spending around. But now, before continuing with the transactions, what's one thing that we notice here is that we don't actually have a name for this goal. So we might need to address that to start. So if we think about palm tree, let's see what happens if we have a palm tree here, or even like a tree. Thinking about sun. Let's see what comes up there. There we go. If we think about maybe a user might have a primary savings goal that they're working towards, right? So what we can maybe do is just pivot this a little bit to add some additional context for the user, where instead of savings goal, we can actually give it a specific name. So what we can do is we can set that to the left and left align that and put it tropical vacation, save 15%. There we go, something like this. And then we can even remove sort of like that savings goal. So they can see exactly what it is that they're saving for, which is maybe like a primary goal. Okay, so one that they would set as their primary goal, which is the one that's on the dashboard. Because again, if you think about savings or budgets, they might be saving for that first. Okay, so they have their tropical vacation, how much they saved, how much they need, and they're in some pretty good shape. So with that now let's move on to those transactions. So next, let's do the transactions piece. So if we look at it, we sort of have, transaction buttons, insight alerts, maybe we won't focus on, but we still need one for like upcoming bills and like a carousel list. Goal tracker card we already have. Spending progress ring we also already have too. So maybe what we can do now for a spending app is to focus on those transaction pieces. So if we think about sort of the look and feel for transactions, like this is kind of the look and feel that we're going for here. This is kind of a nice treatment. You know what? Why don't we take this one for now? I know I could probably go back to open up Mobbin and get it sorted, but we're going to leave it as is for now. Maybe just that kind of treatment we might just want to recreate. Okay. Now, I know we need to improve so the look and feel of this. Looks a little bit boring for now. We're probably going to come back and tweak things a little bit later on once we get the structure down. Okay. And again, I'm not the world's best visual designer by any means, so keep that in mind. So maybe what we can do is have something like Netflix, which is our text, set this to our text body. Again, always make sure you're using your appropriate styles. And then this year is also monthly in 3 days. Okay. So we can see what's coming up. And we can also set this to our text placeholder to offer some differentiation. So with that, maybe this here can be in 3 days. Oops, sorry, I already have the in 3 days. We need to set this to a different color, maybe like our warning, like our text warning. There we go. So you can see what's coming up. And then also set this to, like $3.99 or $11.99, something like that. So let's go ahead, add some auto layout between these two elements. Set this to hug and also to hug. And one thing too, we also want to add in like a home icon as well. There we go. And we can set this to not a default subtle, but maybe like another warning, like an icon warning or something. I don't know. There we go. There we can set this. We'll keep it at that size for now. And let's add some auto layout between these elements. We need to make sure that it's responsive. So I'm going to select this, set this to fill, and then set this to hug. Keep that nice and snug. So now, oh, that rhymed. So now I can see that this here is responsive as best as it is. Now, one thing too is we might also want to have some space in between them. So even like 4, 8, and then also add a stroke just on the bottom and set this to our border default subtle. And we can call this our transaction item. We can create the component of this and then bring down a copy. Okay. So very similar to what we did up here. Maybe we can do something where it's like, upcoming expenses. We can maybe just detach this. and place it inside and sort of see what the feel is, like what the vibe is. We set that to fill to make sure it fits. Okay, it doesn't look too bad. Let's get rid of some of these other elements here. Doesn't look so bad in the grand scheme of things to sort of see like what's upcoming. One thing I'm curious about trying though is where we don't have any space on any side of those transactions. So what I mean by that is this here is going to be its own card, and the title is there also going to be therefore be its own card. So with this, we can actually remove the padding all around and then connect it to what's up here. And if we set this to 0, play around with the treatment just a little bit, so we don't have that border. Maybe this one, we just don't have that border at the top, so we can set it to 0. Keep them nice and snug together. So we would set the radius to 0 and also the radius again, to 0 on this bottom card at the attempt at keeping it nice and snug. And then we can do the same at the top here too, 0 and then 0. And it's not a horrible treatment, if I do say so myself. One thing too is we do proceed to go with this option. We would need to add some padding back in here just on the content itself. So now you can see it looks a little bit more natural as opposed to like having padding all around all the elements. So we can also swap this out for maybe like a payment, like a credit card, upcoming expenses. So you can see what is upcoming. There we go. And we can even set this to 0 to keep it nice and snug. And I like the space in between. So, or sorry, we probably shouldn't do that in terms of the padding, because you're going to notice what that's going to do is it creates inconsistent padding between all the elements, where there's more space here between the border than there is down here. So if we set this to 0, we should do that on our main components. Thanks for calling me out behind the scenes. We can set it to something like 15 or 14. Use your own judgment here in terms of what it is that you're looking for. And I think we're in some pretty good space. Now, in terms of properties, sorry, I've got pretty bad at this, is we can add in like a text property here for the price, and we can also add in a text property here for the item, and then here also for the cadence. Okay, so easy to go through and change some of those pieces of data. One thing too that you're going to realize that when I did that, and I just made a mistake, is it overrode the colors that I had here. And the reason it did that is just simply because like the property was overwritten. So I'm going to go ahead to detach this from here. Now add some auto layout between these two elements. So set this something like 4, and then here in 3 days. And now it's sort of separate from that overall property. We can go ahead and apply the text warning here. Okay, so now we have the cadence, and then also the warning, the time warning. So now when I click on any one of these elements here, I can easily adjust those prices and everything that goes along with it. And we can also do one with the icon as well. So maybe we want to hide the icon. So we can add a layer property to the icon, and then also an instant swap to the icon. So by edit, emojis and symbols, find that downward facing arrow. There we go. And what that's going to do now, it allows us to swap out those icons too, or even also hide those icons should we wish to. Okay, and let's just see what if it looks like. Yeah, if we hide these icons here, if I was to hide home, I actually kind of like it a little bit better, a little bit cleaner, but maybe we'll just leave the icons in there for now. Okay, so now you can see how we're sort of structuring some of these widgets. Now I think maybe what we might want to do is maybe just improve the UI here a little bit. It just looks a little bit plain. Again, we're sort of working within the cadence of the design system that I have, which is meant to be sort of general. And again, if this was an actual production, we'd actually go through and refine the variables to achieve the look and feel that we're going for. So there's just some restrictions that we're working with right now. So maybe what we want to do is just work on refining this dashboard before we move on to the bottom navigation, the other pages like our insights page and things like that. Now let's work on like the visual appearance of this. Looks a little boring, but one thing I want to do is just in terms of consistency, I want on all the pages to have like a nice 12 pixel padding all the way around, but I don't want this to get caught up in it. So what I'm going to do is just select all of the elements that we have here, okay? And we're going to put them inside of their own frame. So now we can control everything that goes within it. And let's select each of this like this and just bring it up to the top as such. Now, sorry, let me set the page background to black so you can see it. We'll just add sort of just like a white canvas in here so you can see as well. So I'm just going to extend this out as such. And now I can connect the two of these and set this to 0. So now I can add padding to like 12 or 18. And even at the top too, like 18 and 18 without affecting this here. Okay, just something I do. So with that now, one thing we can do is I think we need a background color. And I kind of like this background color up here. I think it looks a little bit snazzy. So let's just simply color match. No idea if it's actually the same. And I think that looks a little bit better already. And just for consistency, let's just do the same here as well. Okay. Oops. Wrong one. There we go. Now we're cooking. So let's set the page background back to what it was before. And a couple of things that we noticed here. So maybe if we want to reduce the gap here between at least these elements by something like 12, I think that works. And it looks like we have an issue here where these aren't properly filling up the container. So let's set those to fill and fill. Okay, so there's a couple small issues that we noticed. So first off, that doesn't stand out right away, but maybe I'm kind of curious how this would look if we were to apply a drop shadow here. So if I apply just like an XL drop shadow, I think that enhances it a little bit, helps them stand out. Now this drop shadow, I have one. What I do here is it's 0, 0, 24 blur, a -16 spread. So I actually set it to a negative because it sort of creates like that soft gradient. That's also pretty powerful. So I think we're in some decent shape. Now, one thing that I'm curious about is if we were to also put this inside of a card. So let's play around with that treatment. Okay, so now let's play around with this a bit. So let's maybe add just like a fill here, which is also going to be like that surface defaults. And let's add padding here. So we got, what's the padding that we have down here? It looks like 12 pixels and full pixels all the way around. So I think that this here is a little bit too big. Maybe if you want to set this to our H6 and then this is like our body medium, I think that might help tighten things up a bit. Medium. There we go. And maybe even also reduce the gap here to something like 8. Okay. So it's not looking half bad. And I believe we had a 12 pixel radius here. And always be sure to add that border default subtle. And also that same XL drop shadow. Doesn't look so bad. I almost wonder if we were to ungroup these and then in this section altogether, if we were to add the same level of elements. I don't think it looks horrible, if I do say so myself, but I almost wonder maybe we might need a little bit more space at the top. Let's play around with it. Let's maybe try to left align it to keep things a little bit consistent. Hey, Kirk, maybe we can add in, even just to make it a little bit more fun, we can also add in like a little wave. So here I'm just going to edit emojis and symbols. I'm just on a Mac. So hello, Kirk. Looks like you're on track to stay within your budget this month. And maybe we can even just hack it a little bit. No, I'm not the biggest fan of that, but I feel like it's just missing something. So, hey, Kirk, looks like you're on track to stay within your budget this month. I think that looks half decent. I think maybe we might need something here where in order to spruce things up, maybe we have just sort of like a info icon or like a tooltip just on that right-hand side. Or if we extend this out, it might give the user a little more information about what this here is referring to. So there's small things that we can do there to really like spruce it up. And if we were to set this to a little bit of softer color, so this is our icon, maybe we set it to our default subtle, I think that sort of fits in just a little bit better. Okay, so there's things that we can do here to spruce up that, but I think it's sort of with everything left aligned, I think with the card also aligned left, I think it also makes things a little bit better. So okay, again, we might come back and tweak this a little bit later on, but we have sort of this initial dashboard page here, okay? So it doesn't look half bad. There's still some things that we could probably tweak. Again, we might also, in the future, we might want to think about like a bell Like you might have, a bell up here. You might have other navigation elements. You also might have a logo too somewhere here. But maybe we can come back and revisit that at the end. But now we have that initial dashboard. We have some initial treatments that we're going to use. Now let's look at building out some of the other pages and things like the bottom navigation. Okay, so we have a half decent looking dashboard. Let's now move over on to our insights page. Okay, so our insights page, you're going to recall what we built a little bit earlier on before I sort of went down that path. We're sort of thinking about how we can structure some of the data on the application. Is our insights going to have these, like the key tabs that we had earlier up here, but just offer a little bit more detail. Again, keeping that dashboard high level, but keeping everything else like a little bit more like, what's sort of looking for, refined, I guess you could say. So one thing first, we have our overview, we're going to have our expenses, and we're going to have our income. So the treatments that I really liked here, where I got the inspiration, it was just from these three. So I'm going to bring this down here and see if there's anything else that we might want to take from it, other pieces of inspiration. Oh yeah, just take a quick browse over things that we have thus far. Insights, I think. Sorry, I'm just thinking out loud here. Taking a quick scroll through. And maybe some of these too. I think these might come in handy, which is some of the research that we've done. Okay, but I'm not too sure. So let's just move these down. And one thing too is like, if the view insights, the button here is going to come from here, we're going to need the option. We wouldn't want the option to navigate back. Now, I think probably not a half bad option is to have something in between this card and our top nav here that's just like insights. So if we set that as such, let's go into our asset panel, pull in like a chevron. I already had one set up. And then let's add some auto. Let's connect both of them here. Oops. There we go. Add some auto layout and simply just drag it simply in between. Okay. But there's a couple things that are wrong with this. Now, the first off is we want this centered. But if I was to set this to fill, it's actually not centered because we have this icon on the left. So a hack that I always like to do is just copy one of the size of the frames, 24 by 24, and remove whatever's inside of it. And what that's going to do is, again, it's going to like the frame itself is still there, but doesn't have any element within it. And it keeps that insights and that like tab nice and centered. Then we can set that to our body so it stands out. Now, if we look at the card below, it's 18 by 18. So let's set that horizontal padding to also 18. And maybe we'll keep the horizontal padding as is for now and just color match the background. I know I went off script with the color. There we go. So then we have our insights that I can navigate back to. Okay. So we have our overview, we have our expenses, and then we also have our income. Now for this is where instead of having multiple pages for multiple tabs, like having one page for overview, another page for expenses, we can actually use our componentry variants in order to build this out. So it's just one page with one variant that has the option to swap variants between overview, expenses, and income. So let's build that out. Okay, so let's get started now. So one thing I'd like to call out is if you already have the same type of graph on the dashboard, you really need to show it elsewhere. Probably not. Again, think about simplicity for your users, not just like putting things to offer additional information. So what we can actually even do here is just remove the overview if you really wanted to. Again, we're going to keep things a little bit simple for the purpose of this exercise. Okay, so one thing we can do now is we can go into like our expenses and also like our income and sort of grab those elements and bring them in. Now, if we were to just to navigate them below, it's not a bad treatment as it is already. And if we look at what we have down here, sort of the examples that we liked is like these are fine, but I think these just offer a little bit more depth and they're a little bit more in line with what we had up here as well. So what we can actually do is we can even just bring in that same element and it's your expenses and then also your income, right? Now, an overview for this tab. Now, like if you were to have an overview, it could be a mix of expenses and income, money in, money out. Maybe we're just going to leave it like this for now for the purposes of this exercise. And then what we can do is simply just add some more, set that gap to something like 0, and really just list a bunch of expenses that are coming in. Okay. Now, what's important to note here is there might be a completely separate page for like those transactions where you add transactions, you can remove transactions, that kind of thing. This is more, these are insights. They're not just specific to transactions. So maybe it might make sense as well, similar to how we have up here, to have the specific categories in order. So, this could be shopping. This could be shopping. Let's see the text that they have here. So a percentage of expenses, which is pretty good. Maybe we can even just remove these if we'd really like to. 7% of expenses. We can also do something where it's, other, right? But seeing this now is, if we look at the graph, we need legends for the graph. So although we took the transaction items, this is something that a lot of designers tend to do, is they tend to take existing components that they already have when they try to fit it in within a use case. But for us using this now, it's not like the best use case to use that component. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove that transaction item, and we're going to call this a category item. Category item. Category. Wow, I really can't spell. Category item. There we go. And then what you can also do is, even to offer some additional color, add a fill. So in this case I can't remember the specific hex codes that we're using. So we're just going to eyeball it here. Eyeball it, and then set the icon to like a icon on color. So which will be that white. And then we can just set the radius to something like 50, or that round, even blow it up to make it a little bit bigger. So like, 5 by 5, something like that. So now it's coordinated with the specific item, and that stops them having to remove the in 3 days too, right? So this is going to be our category item, and these are what we're going to use here. So we can go ahead and just simply paste this in, and then we can ultimately use these ones. Now, when it comes to like items like this, where there's a bunch of different variants, what a lot of designers will do is they'll just simply go in here and just change the background color. What that does is it creates a level of inconsistency. So it's always my suggestion always to use your proper variants. So if this here is a status, this here might be, shopping. This might be travel. And this might be other. Sorry, it's not status, but like something like category. So there's some consistency in sort of the colors that you choose and the components that you choose. So if another designer comes along, is they still have this as well. So they're not eyeballing colors either. So this can be travel, and then this can be our other. And then, we can do one more, show shopping. This here is travel. This here is our other. Then we might also have one for like recreations, like gym memberships and stuff like that. Recreation. And then this might be a different one here. Let's go with the purple. So now we can swap out those icons, where this is like a gym. Fitness. This is other. All. Let's see if there's like an all encompassing. I have no idea what's going to roll with that. We got travel. Let's go with like a plane or something. There we go. And we have shopping. So we sort of have like some good options that we can choose from. Okay. So I don't think that looks half bad. One thing we might want to do is just add a little bit of padding here and set this to fill. And then also set all these to fill. Oops. This one didn't get caught up in it. Fill. So it sort of adds like that level of differentiation. Okay. So now what we can do is we can create the component of this and call this like our insights. And now using this, what we can actually do is we can create sort of the opposite side for the income, and then take the one variant and then bring it inside of our frame. Okay. So also too, on the insights here, before we move to income, this can even be like plus 16% more than normal, again, just to offer some additional insight here. And we can set this to like what do you want to call it? Text, maybe like an error or something. I know it might remove the property within it, but again, thinking about how this can be insightful. Let's continue. So let's add a variant here that's going to be for income. So this is going to be our type. This here is going to be our income variance, and then this here is going to be our expense variance. So We can make this to selected and then this to unselected and vice versa. So when you hit this one, what's going to happen is you are going to navigate over here and vice versa. So back and forth. Beautiful. Let's then bring in our income graph. So income earned this month, and we could probably just keep it a little bit more general. Now, if we think about income, there's only like a couple. Where did our... Oh, sorry, I accidentally deleted our components here. Sorry. Bring this down. There we go. If you think about income, and we can also do this for like our income items, just copy the component group. As we think about income, there's only a couple ways to really earn income. It can be like paychecks, dividends, interest. This will be other, and then like interest. So really like only a couple key ways that you could actually earn income. Again, we can get more in specific if you want to, but like let's search like a briefcase job, see what comes up. There we go. So like your paycheck, you might have dividends. This is like stock. There we go. I think that's fine. And then you have your interest payments. This is like swap this out with your bank. There you go. And there you have your interest payments, 7% of income. Just change it all out to income from expenses, income, and then total income. Okay. So then what we can do is really just swap these in down here, where just simply copy and paste. Oops, something did not go as expected there. So let's bring down one of these and then just paste it really inside of this group. And always be sure to set it to fill and fill. And we can start to remove some of these. Oops. Get rid of these two. Make sure we have the naming right here. So it's still pulling in the old category. So this here can be paychecks. This here can be divx. This here can be other, and then this here is interest. So copy in the 4, 3, 4. This is dividends. This is other, and then this is, interest. There we go. So then what we can do is we can then go ahead and bring this in all together and just plop it in, get rid of the old one here. Oops. There we go. And now if I was to preview this, one thing you're going to notice here is that when I swap between expenses and income, it looks like there's a little line there. I'm not too sure what's going on there. Notice how it's adjusting the tab itself. Again, because we used our variants, it doesn't look like there's a tab there. Sometimes this happens with Figma. You might see a little bit of a bar there, sorry, like in between the insights, but with in between like frames. But anyways, we'll keep moving forward. Okay, so we have a half decent insights page now. Leveraging the graphs that we built a little bit earlier on. Again, keeping some of those secondary pieces of data outside of the dashboard, but still allowing a user to like easily access that data. But now let's look at some of our bottom nav pieces in those pages. Okay, so now let's move on to some other elements here. So if we think about like the bottom navigation, so we have transactions. It's pretty important with the budgeting. So you can see everything that's coming in, maybe across like some different bank accounts. So everything that's coming in, everything that's coming out. So a little bit different than insights. Insights might be a little bit more like that general, as we saw, like the category level. This might be specific to like individual items, whether you bought a coffee, so-and-so. Budgets, monthly annual budgets. This can maybe kind of see like how much you have left to spend on this specific day in order to track your budget. Goals and savings, like creating a goal. So I think maybe what we'll focus on to start is maybe transactions and budgets, because I think there's a bunch of different ways that we can go ahead and like look at goals. So we'll leave that until the end. So let's flip back over to Mobbin and focus on transactions and budgets now, because I know that it's kind of boring and tedious watching me scroll through Mobbin. On Mobbin, there's Monarch, and they got a lot of great inspiration. It's very similar to Wealthsimple here in Canada, if you're familiar with Wealthsimple at all, where they have lots of great screens relating to transactions. It's kind of like the look and feel that we're going for. It's like transaction details, things like that. Also for budgets too, which I'm like a huge fan of. Like I love some of their treatments that they have. So let's go through and screenshot. Maybe we'll look at this, maybe one other just for reference, but for the most part, we'll keep it like pretty general. As if we go down to their budgets, so they got it's actually kind of similar treatment to what we have. Believe it or not, I actually found this while I was browsing and said, ooh, that's kind of similar to us. So they have this transactions screen here, and this is kind of look and feel that I'm going for in terms of the transactions. Now, one thing that they also have is they actually have something for cash flow. And this is like why Mobbin is so great, is because you can see what other competitors are doing, what they're leaving out, and things like that. So also too, like new transaction, like these screens here are just absolutely great to be able to add some of the new transactions. Just maybe split the bills, but we're not going to get into a lot of those subflows today, just for the purposes of this exercise. But what they have is actually like this cash flow section. Now this is similar to what we did with Insights, so I think I'm going to leave it out. But I think maybe there's like some lessons that we can take here in terms of like an overall visual. Like maybe you want to also show like a bar graph of money in, money out, like that kind of thing for comparison, similar to an Insight, but money in, money out, because you might be up for your budget, but you might be spending a little bit more, making a little bit more than you would have thought. Okay, so I think that's not a bad treatment. And also too, while we're here, is they also have this really great treatment for budget. And this was actually what I was speaking to like a little bit earlier on, where if you have a budget left for the day, how much have you earned that day? How much do you spent that day? And then in order to stay on your budget, how much do I have left to spend? So it's those kinds of ideas, which I really like. And yeah, and I think maybe too, like this kind of treatment here for transactions like upcoming, all recurring, things like that, very similar to what we saw on the dashboard, could also be of great inspiration. And as I did a broad search for Mobbin, again, it looks like for things like transactions, everything is like relatively similar. So whether it's like a competitor, or like a quasi competitor as well. So let's take a couple screenshots here, one of Chase, one of a Grab. I know Grab is really big in Asia. And also too, like this kind of thing isn't this kind of treatment too. This is all really similar stuff. So I think with the inspiration that we have, maybe able to come up with like a couple of good examples. So I've gone ahead and added screens from Mobbin for transactions, the one that we found for budgets. So for this is and also too, one of the inspiration that we took from another app here, I kind of like this kind of treatment. So this week, in, out, and then I think a list of transactions like beneath that could be kind of cool, because it's kind of little bit of a different treatment than what you see, or it's just a boring list of transactions. I wonder if we can include a graph at the top, very similar to another example that we saw here. So I think that's the kind of the format that we're going to go. And again, we have the pages that we've already built right here. So with that, I think if there's some inspiration that we can pull from, I think it's this one, and thinking. This here is probably pretty good. So I think if we can grab them from these screens, where I kind of like the format here, how the transactions are full width. It's a little bit different than what we've been doing before, but maybe it helps if we mix it up. So I think, again, just marking off sort of the treatments that we like. So we get a stroke outside, again, just set it to something like a lime green, bright green. So this kind of treatment where it's full width, I like this kind of, because it also has the call out here. This kind of graph can be a little bit more interactive. And of course, these formats for transactions that I think that we can work with. Okay. So I think those are the three key elements that we'll bring into the transactions. Okay, so I just added like one or two other screenshots that I found. One from before, another one I just kept browsing. This is sort of also a really clean treatment we might try to mimic. And I also have the Starbucks logo, because we might include it for this kind of treatment here, to have like a company logo on the inside. Why I chose Starbucks, I just love coffee. Okay, fun fact about me, I like coffee. I drink like 15 coffees a day. I don't buy them all, of course, it's too expensive. But okay, so there we have our dashboard, and then we have like our insights. Insights. Now, one thing I want to do is at the top here. Okay, so if this here is going to be our transactions, one thing I'm going to loop back to maybe at the end, just because I don't know the styling that I want to do yet, is like the graph piece at the top here. Like I wanted to have some type of treatment beyond just like a standard, something that we've just done already before, right? Like you doing this tutorial so we can get better together. You follow me, I help you, you help me with feedback and vice versa. Okay, it's a team effort here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we can, to save time and to hack around the system a little bit. Sorry, I moved these components out of the way and I thought I organized them, but I clearly did not. Where is this component? There we go, found it. So we can bring in one of those category items and just bring it in as such. Okay. Now, one thing that is important to note is if we look at all of these, they're kind of full width. And I want to introduce a new treatment that sort of goes beyond sort of like this card format, right? Again, just because you have a card format on your dashboard doesn't mean it needs to be everywhere. Okay, so let's just go ahead and let's just detach this and we'll move these out of the way. Actually, these two we don't even need. We have them above. Let's focus on, so first off, let's get rid of that because this is our transactions, and we can also just get rid of that too. So starting off with our transactions here is very similar to what we have here. So we can be like coffee at Starbucks. Okay, you can include the logo, you can not include the logo if you don't want to. I'm going to include the logo for now just because it sort of helps to keep things a little bit, cleaner, or not cleaner, but more intuitive. That pulls in the logo, shows you where you actually spent your money. One thing you can also do is add a quick fill, like a surface around that logo as well. Make that radius like 99 or 100 or whatever that round value is. Because one thing that you're going to notice is that when we put it on the actual page itself, as it stands right now, it sort of adds like that white border around it. Okay, it just offers additional differentiation. That's really the only purpose of it. Okay, so so I see the logo. What else we got here? And then also the date at the bottom. So like September 10th, 2024. And we can even make this a little bit smaller if we want for like 09, 10, 2025. And what's the format that they have here? So actually a different format, sorry. 10th of September, 10 Sept, 2025, 3:10 p.m. Okay, something like that works just fine. And we can also specify the dollar value if it's Canadian, if it's in USD, so on and so forth. Okay, and that's pretty similar to what we have up here as well, although they also only have the time. I actually think the time might be a little bit easier, simply because if we want to separate things out by date, this just shows recent, but this actually has a date that's actually applied to it. So I think we're going to roll with that. Okay, so let's create the item of this. Let's call this our transaction item. Transaction item. I know we already have a transaction item. This is a little bit of a different one because I know we have like transactions or expenses down here. This is just a little bit of a different format. So still looking at it, okay? So let's go ahead and let's start piecing this together. So let's bring this in and maybe just copy a bunch as such, put them in a group, set them to 0, okay? Not too bad. Still, I think there's some tweaks that we can make. Again, I'm going off the cuff here. So we can also copy what this app did. I can't remember the specific name of it, where it's like today. And then what they have in the middle is also just like that sort of ellipse tool, sort of that small ellipse. We can set this to our surface. Let me move my video bar out of the way again. Surface default. And then the total that was spent for that day. So like 56.79, doesn't matter. And we can set this to like our text caption. So it's just a little bit lighter. And then we can set the gap of those to what happened here. Let me see. Sorry, something's going astray. What happened here? Set to hug and hug. And hug and hug. There we go. Okay, so we can set this to something like 12. And now if we put this sort of maybe inside that group, or maybe even outside the group, just to offer a little different differentiation, we can set this to fill. And I can sort of see how our transactions, they're coming together a little bit. Okay, but there's still some tweaks that we're going to want to make because maybe we might want this background to be white on some of these, and just some more visual tweaks that we can make so we just have the foundations down. Okay, so let's keep moving forward now. Okay, so still continuing on here is if we look at this example, this just has a history filter, but these actually have more proper filters. So I think we should recreate some of the filters that we have there. Now, we're going to get to that just in just a sec. But if we think about transactions, it can be like September 10th, 2024. Okay, so you're just going to see the transactions today. The transactions is on September 10th, and so on and so forth. But with that, I'm thinking about sort of the format of this, where I want to have some type of card at the top, right? Like some type of visualization for ins and for ins and outs. So for now, what I'm going to do is maybe just bring this in here. Sorry, we'll bring this entire section actually in here and just sort of position it at the top. And then we can detach this and get rid of this. So just so we can start to visualize things a little bit, and we can just get rid of that, knowing that some type of graphic might be there. Now, if we think about sort of the title, okay, I also might want to bring back in this treatment right here that we had before. We can simply just get rid of the icons just simply because they're not really needed. Now, we can keep a small title for something like transactions, keeping things simple, because in the bottom navigation, I already know that this here is going to be my transactions. Now, I deviated there, but let's have these types as well. So we're going to need by date. So what we can do, this is nice and simple, is just have date. Be sure to set this to our text body. We can go ahead, add some auto layout, and just pull in chevron. Where's my chevron down? Whatever, I'll just pull in one and just rotate it for now. It's not best practice, but I'm a rule breaker here at UI Collective. So then we can simply paste that inside. So I'm going to set this to a 4 and to a 4. And I'm going to add a fill and set this to a border default subtle and set the radius to something like, maybe like, where's that round? Okay. Now that obviously isn't right. So we're going to need some more space on either side. We maybe set it to 12 and adjust the gap of these to 4. So we can call these just our filter components, where we can create the component of these. There we go. So we have one for filter. We might also have one for source. And we also might want to have one that they have here for more like expanded filters. So for this one, we can actually just get rid of that and then swap this out for like a filter. I don't see the exact filter icon, but something like that works just fine. Oops, sorry. And I forgot that because I had rotated it originally. This one's going to get rotated too. It needs to rotate it back around. But anyways, there we go. Okay, so there we have just some of our initial filters where we can go ahead, add some auto layouts, call these our filter bar. And then we can simply paste this inside. Actually, before we do that, let me undo and drag this out. And so just to avoid some of the formatting, one thing I can do is I can also just like place this inside this and then get rid of these elements here where you have some level of filtering. Now, I think this looks a little bit awkward as it stands right now. It's just a little bit weird. It's just a little bit clunky. It feels like it's missing something. So let's take a look at how we can solve this next. So you can see here that just because the treatment works on this example doesn't mean it's going to fit into our example, right? Because we have sort of some different background colors. This is all white. Like that might not be meant to display sort of a really large list of transactions, or maybe it is, who knows, right? So it's a good rule of thumb that just because it works on one doesn't mean it works on all. Now, I work a lot with different componentry, different banks, things like that. And whenever I come across this use case, I always like to have all of my filters accessible at once. So because if I needed to apply different filters for the date, the source, and other filters, all of a sudden I'm hitting like 3 or 4 different buttons making selections. It'd be way easier if everything was within one source. So what I like to do is I actually just like to get rid of them and just have all my filters in some type of card pop up. Okay. Just my own personal preference because it keeps things nice and clean. So from there, what I can do is I can then go ahead, set this to something that's a little bit larger and sort of have all transactions. All transactions, if I want to filter, I could select the filter and that would bring an upward modal where I could go through and select the modals. Or what I can also do is maybe I can also even search. There we go, set that to round, or I can also even search. So instead of having sort of all these modals automatically displayed, or all these like types of filters automatically displayed, I kind of like to bucket them a little bit. It just helps to keep things like nice and clean, and that's just my own personal preference. Okay, so we have our transactions page all set up, but we still need to focus on the graph. Now, personally, I think because we have the dashboard where we do have all of these cards, like they're not full width in these cards as well. I think for some type of a consistency across the pages, I think this card should also be this graph should also be a card as well, and not necessarily something that's full width like this, because then there's a serious inconsistency across all our pages. I think with the transactions, because it's such a long list, the names could get long. I think that's when it's okay to extend that to that full width. So let's work on that graph next. So one quick thing that I want to do here before we move on to the graph is with these is we actually need to specify whether it's like a deposit or like a withdrawal, right? Because that's technically part of like the transactions. So this can be sort of a deposit, excuse me. And one thing we're going to do is just take the dot that we had in between and just position it between these two elements here as such. There we go, and center it in the middle. And we can also set that to like that text placeholder. Okay, there. So if we have sort of a deposit or like payment or withdrawal, whatever it is, that can also just specify sort of the type of transaction. Okay, but now let's move on to this graph. So let's go ahead and recreate this. Now, this is also handy because it sort of has like the graph section also has sort of like a call out, like set up your automatic transactions. You don't need to add them every time, like that kind of thing, right? Anyways, let's continue on. So with that, let's take a screenshot down and sort of blow it up a bit. And let's get to work. Okay, so one thing we're going to want to do is start to recreate some of these elements here. So we have an in, and we also have an out. So start off with the in for now. I'm just going to extend this and maybe give this like a surface defaults, and then set this the color of our text on color. And we can also set this to a little bit larger to maybe like our medium. Sorry, coughing here. And then set this to like a 4 and 8, and be sure that this is set to hug and hug, which it is, and make sure this is set to hug and hug. Okay, so we have our in, and if we look at what they have here, we sort of have like the radiuses. So we can set it to something like 12, and then also like 12. And I think that's in some pretty good shape. Okay, so we can see what's coming in and what's coming out. So for what is coming in, thinking about how we might want to structure this, I'm actually going to add another auto layout frame over top of this. So as you can see, another auto layout frame as such, and I'm just going to give it sort of like this gray background just so you can see it. Now, I want it to be snug with what's on here. So, excuse me. I think there's a couple different approaches that we can take. Thinking about which one might be best is actually to remove the top padding and the padding just on the left there. And then we can extend this out as such. We can set this, just fix that for now. And then if we were to add the text, place it inside, use the horizontal, use another auto layout to reposition it to the left. I think there we can then have the dollar value. You can set this to fill. Okay, so we have our 0.00. And for this, we might want to set this background to surface default subtle, and our text to our default. So we can see the money that's coming in, and then also the money that might also be coming out. And this here might be out. And we can change this to our surface success to that surface default. There we go. Okay, so we have our money coming in, and then we also have our money coming out. Now, what they also do really well is they also sort of have this date toggle. So let's try to recreate that too, where let's bring this down, set this to this week, and then use a chevron. Where is it? keyboard. I forget. I think that's what they call it. Keyboard control and material icons. Arrow. Sorry, I don't want to rotate another chevron again, but I will if I have to. Okay, looks like we're rotating a chevron. So let's bring this in and then just rotate it. So use sort of a filter for this week. There we go. We can also set this to something like 12. And then we can extend this out and also do a date range very similar to what we do. So Monday, 16 June. 16 June, sorry, I was just seeing date formats to Sunday, 22nd of June. Excuse me, sorry, I'm coughing. Then we can set this to our regular and then also to that caption. So let's extend this out a little bit. I think we're in some pretty decent shape. So let's add some auto layout here. Make sure that this here is set to fill. And then just extend this out horizontally. So it always will take the shape of that container. And let's put these in an auto layout frame. And then let's simply just plop it in here and see how things are looking. So it doesn't look so bad. I actually think it looks relatively half decent to start. But it's good. It's not great. You know, I think there's still some things that we can play around with. And if we look at the example, it also has this heading for like in and out. I almost wonder if we also bring that into where it's in and out. There we go. And they also have the little badge for the number of accounts, but we'll revisit that a little bit later on. Excuse me. Ooh, getting sick. Okay, so what they also have here, and I removed that out for now, I just didn't really like it, is what they also do really well is they also have this sort of banner encouraging people to maybe, you know, set up their automatic transactions. So you don't need to add transactions every time. Okay, so maybe we could explore that part next. Okay, so let's recreate this option that we have right here. So set up automatic transactions, you know, like link an account or something, transactions, and then just bring down the same font that we had here. Link your account to automatically link your accounts to automatically upload transactions, to automatically upload transactions or something. And then let's have maybe like a little, like a bell, like a notification maybe. I don't know, something like that. Add a quick frame around it. Let's set it to like a surface. Let's go with the default subtle and maybe give it a little rounded corner, something like 4. There we go. So let's add that in auto layout frame. Also add that in an auto layout frame then. And now let's work to actually bring this inside here. Now, one thing that we're going to want to do is very similar to how it's snug here. It sort of creates like this cohesive card. So what we're going to do is just copy this, delete, then paste this inside. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to get rid of the drop shadow on both of these. And also the border. And then we're going to merge them together as one. So drop the gap entirely. And you can see how now they're coming together a little bit. So let's add some auto layout to sort of connect the two officially. And let's adjust the top radius of this to set to 0. And then the bottom radius of this to also to 0. And then maybe we might want to do on the bottom as well is just a stroke on the bottom. And we're going to set that to our border default subtle. Okay, so now you can see how it's all coming together. And then to be consistent with what we've done is we can add a stroke on the outside. We'll set that to our border default subtle. We're going to set the radius of all of them to 12. And then we can go ahead and reapply that effect. So that's our drop shadow XL. There we go. It doesn't look half bad. One thing we might want to do, reduce the gap in between these and position it at the top. So that there is at the top. And then maybe we want to add just sort of a chevron that rightward facing chevron, encouraging the user there to take action. Now, when we do that, what that does is it actually keeps it in the center, but it recenters our bell, and I don't think that's the worst thing in the world, okay? So that might encourage the user to click that, take action, set up some of those automatic contributions, whatever it is, okay? Perfect. So I think we're in some pretty good shape for our transactions. One thing we're also missing is the option to add a new transaction. So with that, we might want to bring back an icon here and just simply paste it in the top for now. There's some things that you could do also with quick actions. Like if you wanted to bring quick actions inside of this card, you'd have the option to do so. But maybe we just want to keep it nice and simple, have an icon there at the top. And how do we set our icon? Yeah, we'll leave it like that for now. Oops, sorry. So I have an icon there at the top, position 1 on the left-hand side, and just get rid of the inside just to make sure that transactions always stay centered. I'm not too sure if I'm the biggest fan of that. It could just be that maybe this icon is personally just a little big. Like if you were to set it to 20 by 20, that's a little bit better, but still not the biggest fan of it. But again, if we already have add transaction on a dashboard as a quick action, it's not the worst treatment in the world, but maybe we'll come back and revisit it a little bit later, okay? But I think for transactions now, just in the interest of time, I think we're in some pretty good shape. So we have the componentry set up. We have some of the different treatments that we built based on the inspiration that we did with Mobbin. Next, what I think we're going to look at is we're going to look at the budgeting section. So if we look at what GPT gave us, right, in terms of like the 4 to 5 tab layouts. So for budgets, create and monitor monthly, annual budgets and category spend alerts, okay? So this is kind of where we need to you be a little careful, because we kind of have pieces relating to budget on the home page, but even to a transactions, you can sort of see what's this week, what's in, what's out, have like sort of a filter for that too. So I think for the budget page, I know I grabbed a screenshot before that we really referenced. Like I really like the treatment here along the top where you can toggle between months. Maybe you're spending for August and July, but we need to be careful not to have too much overlap around some of these summary level cards. Let's flip back to Mobbin and find some inspiration. So one that stands out to me right away is this one from Truebill, where basically you can set budget categories and for like things like auto and family care and groceries and stuff. So I want to click in here. I kind of want to see what other treatments that they have for some of these things. So let me try to find that. Try to find that one. Let's see if we can find it. Okay, so here's a flow for also like adding a bill as well. And this might come in handy when we build that out. I'm also going to take a screenshot of just these ones right here. And here we go. It looks like perfect. So this looks like it's budget setups. This is kind of what we're going for. An option to add a budget. You can choose the categories and take a screenshot of this as well. And then auto and transport to sort of set the budget for that. Okay, so 160. Delete the budget. Again, monitor your score over time. And then we get into some basic sort of question management. See if there's anything else here that sticks out to me. No, I think that's relatively it in the grand scheme of things for this one. So let's just go back, see if there's any other screen that jumps out to us in the first like 30 seconds or so, and then we'll dive back. So this is also Monarch. It's pretty similar to what we saw with the last one. Sort of the categories, what's your budget, how much is remaining. So I think it's relatively straightforward. Budget and schedule. So I think there's some good custom options here that a user would be able to choose from. So I like that, although it's not necessarily for a budget app, but something else. And I think maybe we have enough just to get started. So nothing else that really stands out to me here. So I think what we can do is we can flip back to Figma and we can dive right back in. Okay, so I'm going to take some inspiration from this one particularly, where I really like how they have the budget basics, like your monthly income and your bills and utilities for things like rent, sort of the budgets that are like essential. And then you get into different categories, like how much you want to spend each month for, the standard stuff. One thing I also really like this budget bar. So we're going to keep that in so I can see how much they might still have left to spend. And then also we're going to look at how we can edit some of these budgets, maybe remove them or sort of create a new budget too. So get into some different flows and some different screens here. So those are the ones that I really like. Starting off with, so I'm just going to copy this page over. We're just going to call this, manage budget for now. Okay. One thing I might do is I might introduce a new treatment where it's a little bit bigger and it's not as small, but just to be consistent with what we did on insights and also transactions, the managed budget will be similarly the same size because I generally like to keep those things roughly the same. Okay. But looking at what we have here, so we actually kind of lucked out because we kind of have a very similar treatment to what we have here. Okay, so I'm going to detach the transaction item and make this actually a budget item now. Actually, a budget item. We could also use the budget categories if we really wanted to. If we go back here and go to the main component, or sorry, these main components. Oops, maybe I didn't make them a main component. Well, they should have been. But anyways, so we could also just use these, which might save ourselves a little bit of time. Oops, I did make them a component. They're category items. Forgive me that. There we go. So it looks like everything is relatively the same. But one thing that we are missing here is some type of button notifying the user that they actually have the ability to edit it, right? So one thing you can also do is I think it might make sense maybe to make a new component, just knowing that we didn't necessarily plan ahead. But one option you could do is you add a variance to your original components and bring in some type of filter icon. There we go. Some type of filter, some type of icon like that, and set it on the right, and set these as sort of like your like a brand new variant that you can choose from. Or what you could do is you could also just add the icon to your category items and then just have a layer property to hide that icon. So two different approaches that you can take there. I think maybe one thing that we'll do is we'll just recreate it from scratch. Just going to make life just a little bit easier here. Let me copy and paste. There we go. Bring this one over. And let's get started. Okay, so we're just going to keep some of those for now. This might be our category item editable. Again, it's not always best practice to create new components, but just for this purpose of this exercise. And one thing I want to do is I want to find that icon, but we're just going to place one of these in for now. So we're going to have auto and transport, or we can probably just keep these the same. Now we'll make it auto and transport. We'll change it up. Transports, groceries, family care. What are some other ones here? So let's go with monthly income, bills and utilities. We'll keep other as is. Bills and utilities, not bills. Bills and utilities. And then we can go, so we already have recreation, we have monthly income, family care, groceries, and then we can go coffee, just because I'm a big coffee guy. So now we can go ahead and swap out these icons. Coffee, water, monthly incomes, this would be cash. There we go. Set the background here to a green. Bills and utilities, we'll set this one to a light blue. Yeah, we should be using our variables for this. And then coffee, we'll make it there we go. So we can see that these are now editable. And one thing we might want to do too is maybe set this to something that's a little bit lighter, like a default subtle. It's very similar to what they have. Okay, and then they have dollar spent, so $0 last month. And we'll just set this also to food. There we go. And then set this to car. Perfect. So now it looks like we have all the same ones that they have out of the way. So let's go ahead and what are our main ones? So we have monthly income, and then we also have bills and utilities. So we're going to group these together, and then we sort of have all the other categories beneath it. Okay, so we have our auto and transport, family care, groceries, coffee, and also recreation. Oh, and family care should be, let's look for a family. There we go. That works. So let's select all these. Something went astray there. There we go. And also select these ones too. And I think we're in some pretty decent shape here. Again, knowing it's going to be a little bit of a simpler screen. So now that we have some of the foundations down, let's work on translating this inside of the page. Okay, so now what we can do is we can just start to bring these inside, these groups inside here as such. Oops. Just paste it inside one of the ones that we had before, and we can remove everything else that goes along with it. Okay. So a couple things is that it kind of does look just a little bit crazy here already. So I think what we're going to need to do is we need to adjust maybe the horizontal padding or the vertical padding to keep it nice and snug, 12 and 12. And one thing we might also want to do is just add a stroke just on the bottom. Set that to your border default subtle, just to offer some differentiation between some of these elements. Now, right away, there's a couple things that we're noticing here is we've lost the curvature on the outer frame. We're going to set this to 12 and also to 12. And we're going to set the gap to 0, keep things nice and snug. Now, one other thing as well, if we, looks like we can remove the padding just on the bottom here to avoid having sort of that awkward ending to it. So it's 0, there we go. And we're going to need a title of some sort. So they have budget basics inside. So I'm going to copy one of these pieces of text here, left align it, and set this to our budget basics. Budget basics. I don't think that looks that bad. I do think we're missing something though, and some things did go astray. We need to be sure to set these to fill and fill, so it takes up the width of the container. So we have our budget basics. But if we think about sort of what we did over here, maybe we want to also bring in some type of info icon as to like what these are. So you have your budget basics, you can spruce it up, set that to fill, and then double click on auto layout to take the full width of that container. So we have our budget basics now, but what about everything else that goes along with it, which is those budget categories? So let's simply paste those in, set these to fill, and remove. There we go. And then we can start to remove all of those transaction specific items. Okay, so really nice and simple. And these are our budget categories. A little bit of an explanation about what these are. We have our budget categories. We can also change it if we want to. We can modify them. But if we look at sort of the reference here, is what do we still have, right? What other things would we might like to include here? One of which is how much I still have left to budget. So what we can do is that bring back in one of these cards here, paste it in, and just adjust it as such. So let's maybe go ahead and start playing around with different backgrounds. So maybe like a surface success default. So maybe in this case, I actually have a little bit more to spend than I had originally planned. And because those are a little bit too tight, we can add some additional padding just at the bottom there to separate it out. So if we look at the treatment that they had, left to budget, make sure to set these to our white. Our on color body. Again, I teach you how to build the library in one of our other videos. Left to budget. And then maybe you might have like a $1,500 surplus still available to budget. And we can also bring back in sort of that treatment that they have here. Set this to our icon on color. There we go. We can group these together, set that to fill so it stands out to the left-hand side. And we might want to make this also a semi-bold too, so it even just stands out just a little bit more. And we can also shrink this maybe to also a 20 by a 20. Beautiful. So I think we are in some decent shape. But if we think back to some of the other treatments that we saw, under budget categories, they have this option to actually add a budget. So maybe add another category that they would want to budget for. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a real simple button here and just call this add category, bring in that plaza. There we go. Let's select both, add some auto layout between the two. Make sure that this is set to hug and hug, and we can play around with the padding, but it's not going to really matter, and I'll show you why. And make sure that this is set maybe to like our body large medium, and set this to our text body, and this to our icon primary, perfect, which it is. And now let's go ahead and add a quick fill. So let's go ahead, add a fill. This is going to be our surface defaults, or excuse me, our surface defaults. And then we can adjust these actually to the on color versions of everything that we had selected. And I go through this library pretty in depth in one of my other videos. Be sure to add a radius. Let's call this our button. Let them create the component of this, and we can simply pop it in as such. Fill width of the container. Make sure that this is set to center. There we go. And if I was to extend this down, we're going to want to add some additional padding here. Set that to fill. So click in, re-add some padding just on the bottom, 15 or 18 or something. I think that could work. And this button is a little big, so maybe we shrink it down to our medium regular, and also our follow by 20. There we go. Or we can go ahead then and actually add in a category that we would like to budget for based on how much that we have left to spend. Okay, perfect. So we're in some decent shape. One thing too that you could want to do is just make these cards a little bit tighter together, but I think it's fine for now. Perfect. So now let's look at some of the interactions that might go along with the screen. So there's two interactions we might want to add with the screen. Both appear to be pop-up menus. So one of which is the ability to, add a new budget category, and the other is the option to modify how much you want to spend within a category and also remove that category altogether. Okay, so two nice interactions that are good to have. So first things first, let's focus on this add a budget for now. So it looks like they have a bunch of different categories for them to choose from. So with this, one thing we can do is even just, again, if we had structured some of our componentry, right, like we knew where some of these things are coming, one thing we can do is also just copy all these, right? So I'll probably just show you what I mean. Is, so we have our category items. So I'm just going to add some more categories here. So cash and checks, charitable donations, cash and checks, cash and checks, charitable donations, charitable donations, education, dinner and dining. Oops. Education, and then, dinner and dining, and then credit cards. So what we can do is then just set this to just change out the icons here. Check. Payments, cash, similar to our monthly income. There we go. Charity, give, education, so school, dinner, food, and then credit card. So I'm doing this for a reason. You're going to see why. So we have our dinner and dining. Maybe we'll make this one like that color. Credit cards. Let's hope your credit card's in the green. So maybe we'll make it like that lime. Too light. That lime, and then education. Maybe make this one. The school colors that I went to are red, so maybe make this one like a red, and a charitable donation as well. This is maybe also like a 600. There we go. And then this one, cash and checks. Also maybe like a green, but we'll make it way darker. Okay, so you can have your category items here, and these are the ones where if they're filterable, so what you can do is you can add another variant here for like type, and this is already added. And then what you can do is you can select all those categories and set these to not added, where what you would do then is you would select all the ones just in the row and then swap out the icon for the plus. And that's going to allow us sort of have a similar variant. You can see here, these are not added. So they have the plus. And these ones are added. So they have the filter. And I see here that they have a $0 average for the budget, like how much you're spending on it. I don't really necessarily see the point of that, but $0 average. I guess if maybe you add individual transactions, you can sort of have a monthly average, but it's not yet budgeted. So we can just update that text here as well. And let's take the ones that we created new. So let's select all these ones again, because we don't have a budget yet for these categories. Let's add a gap in between, set that gap to 0. And what is it that we also want to include here? So one thing too, because these don't have a dollar amount, sorry, I can also just remove these from each of these. There we go. It's going to clean things up. Beautiful. That's looking great. Okay, so what we're going to want to do is we want to put this inside a card, but maybe we want to bring in sort of like some larger text here. So we can just copy what we had from before, set this to something like add a budget, and we can just copy, I guess, the similar text. Select a spending category below to create a budget for it. There we go. So let's select. Let's also bring in actually our close. There we go. And we can actually then ungroup this and group these together a little bit better. So maybe these are together. Let me think out loud here. No, never mind. It probably makes sense to do it this way. So select both, add some auto layout, select these, add some auto layout, make sure everything fits nicely. And one thing too, we want to make sure that the width is 430. So we can just hard code that width and set the padding inside to something like 18 and then also 18. So maybe just add one budget at a time, set the gap to something like 12. There we go. And then let's go ahead, let's add a fill, which is going to be that white, which can be our surface default. And then add radius of 12 and also 12. So then what's going to happen is, thinking out loud here. If it's the bottom card, maybe you just want to remove that border. Again, you should probably have a variant for it. So then what's going to happen is that when add category is selected, we are going to open on click. We're going to, yes, this one. Oh, sorry. Open overlay. So I don't know why that was so difficult. Centered from the bottom, and it's going to slide up. The animation will just move in also from that bottom. So now if I was to preview this, and I choose to add a category, you can see that we now have the ability to add a budget, add a category for this budget. So yeah, so I think we're in some pretty good shape there for managed budget, but there's still one other one that we also want to do, which is the ability to modify one of our existing budgets. So now let's recreate the ability for a user to adjust what they have. So let's start modifying some of these elements here. Let's delete that. Let's set that to fill. We can remove this. Let's ungroup that. Set this to hug and hug. Set this to hug. There we go. We're going to call this our recreation. Our recreation, we can probably set this to our headings. Oops, this did not have a style to it. So let's be sure to fix that. To our text headings, and maybe our body large, semi-bold. Okay, keep things a little bit smaller. Now, one thing we can do is maybe focus on our recreation. Let's detach this instance and extract some of these values here. So first off, the icon, and the icon from our icon, and we're going to set it to match that purple. Maybe, yeah, I think it's a decent size. So now what we can do is inside of this frame 4, we can paste it inside, use our horizontal, our auto layout to adjust the location of it, and then just position it. Okay, so we sort of have the first part down. But we also need, it looks like, the plus and minus. So let's go into our asset panel, pull in a plus. There we go. Set it to 5, and then also to 5. set the radius to something like 99, set it to fill, and then also minus here too. Set this to minus. There we go. So we sort of have the rough structure of things down. Let's then go ahead, pull this in. This here is going to be our monthly amount. Monthly amount. And then we can bring down so the larger piece of text and set this to something like 0. But maybe you want to make it even bigger. So like an H5 or even an H4. So you should be able to, of course, like either just like adjust the number or also just use the keys here. I think either or approach works. But one thing that I noticed here is they also have like this line at the bottom. So first off, I'm going to make this like detach and just make it the same purple. There we go. So colorized. But they also have that line at the bottom, like a 1 pixel, very faint line. So I'm going to add an auto layout wrapper to that. So I just pressed Shift A and added a frame. And set that border on the bottom and set the border to the very faint, like maybe like a 50% opacity of what that purple was. Okay, so that's how you would go about setting that up. So we can then go ahead, bring in some subtext here. So it looks like you haven't spent any money in this category over the last 6 months. Some type of insight here. There we go. Also have the ability to view transactions, but if you don't have any transactions for this category, then maybe it might not make sense. And then what we can do is we can also just like copy just our button components. And again, you should have a variant for this, but it's kind of a unique use case. We're going to make it sort of what that purple was. And then another one where add the variant where it's just a very subtle shade. A little bit more subtle. There we go. And then inside, we can set this to whatever that purple was. There we go. Might even want to make this even just a little bit lighter still. There we go. So now we can get rid of these. So save, and then delete. So we have our save. We have our delete. And I think now what we can do is we can go ahead and start piecing this together and joining all the frames. So now let's group everything together. So starting off with how you want to do it. Let's actually put these in the same frame and then add this in the row. And we can drag that in as such. Make sure that that is set to fill. And this is also set to fill. Make sure it's centered. There we go. And one thing too that I'm noticing here is we kind of want these to stand out a little bit more. So we're going to add a stroke, surface default, and also a stroke, which is going to be our border. Default subtle. And then we can add this beneath it. Be sure to set that to fill. And then we can have the buttons as such. And we can position these below. Set this to something like, set these to fill. Just set those to 12 and 12 and adjust accordingly. Okay, so now comes sort of the hard part where we kind of need to structure things a little bit. So what we can do is maybe let's set the gap in between a lot of these elements to something like 36. And also increase some of the padding here. So maybe we can increase the padding just on this one to something like 24 to keep it nice and snug. We can even make this text a little bit lighter too. And looking at it is maybe we also want these separated a little bit more from this. So we can set that to something like 48. Make sure that these are the same size. Yeah, those are the same size. It's not great, in my opinion. I think maybe we need to make this a little bit more bold. So our H5 bold, so it stands out a little bit more. But looks like something happened there. Something went astray. So hard code it for now. It doesn't really matter. So it's still not the best, in my opinion. I think it's just because we're working with sort of some of the wrong colors, if I do say so myself, and just some of the wrong styles. But again, if we were inside an actual like production environment, we'd be able to modify things and make it as such. Then if we also add some padding at the top here, something like 24, that's going to shift everything down and also add some additional padding from the bottom to something like 36. There we go. I think that even looks even just a little bit better. And again, this is sort of the process that I go through when I'm playing around and really experimenting. And if we add more padding on the left and also more padding on the right, we'll really increase it actually to 36 and then 36. That might help keep things a little bit more snug. There we go. Oops, what happened here? Set that to fill. Perfect. So it's not great. It's not the best in the world. And it looks like I modified the wrong color here. So silly me. We'll just detach this and just set this to our surface default. I think I edited the wrong button component by accident, or I didn't copy it right. So forgive me there. Okay, so add category is still going to go to add category, but then now any of these buttons on the main components, any of the filters here, what they would do is then they would go to some type of a pop-up as such. So this is recreation, sorry. So then recreation here would probably go to this on click. Exact same functionality is already applied, it looks like. We need to open the overlay, move in from the bottom center. Perfect. So now if I was to hit recreation, again, if I was to preview this, and I was to hit recreation, I can see that pops up. Doesn't look so bad, but maybe we also might want an option just to cancel this too. So save. So it's delete, and then maybe once you start making changes, it changes to cancel. But you also add just in the close in there too. But I'll leave that to you. Okay, so we have our add budget, we have our modify budget category. There we go. We have our budget page, and I think we're in some pretty decent shape with some of the interactions and some of the componentry that we have. So let's keep moving forward. So with a goal here, one thing I'm pretty curious about is, like, there's a bunch of different ways that you can look at goals, especially in the terms of like personal, like budgeting and finance. So there's a couple of things that stand out to me here right away. Okay, so an option for like cards here somewhere on sort of like a goals homepage. So very similar to what we're seeing here. So I'm gonna take a screenshot of this, but then also like a card index page. I know this is something that we looked at too in the past, where we can sort of see how much is saved towards that specific goal, how much of our budget is allocated towards that goal. And if we think about sort of like an accounts, almost like an accounts view, like if you're a bank, you might be able to link different accounts and then pull money into this specific goal. So that kind of thing is kind of where I'm going with it. And one thing I'm just kind of curious about is these two are also pretty nice. I'm going to take a screenshot of these. It's a little bit of a more relaxed treatment, but I'm just worried about finding like consistent illustrations for all those. Maybe it's something we can generate with AI. I'm just going to take one more quick scroll through. I want to see if there's any goal setup. So here I'm under finance, goal and task, and then let's see what happens with. Oh, sorry, it's not what I wanted to do. So let's go goal task and then just goal setup and just see what comes up. Oh, some more specific things too. Soccer, of course, but let's just see here, goal and finance, and let's just say build your goal. Let's just see if anything comes up specific to that. No screens. Let's try to search one more keyword, because usually the terminology is around like build. So let's see what comes up. Welcome to Kraken. And I don't know if we're going to be able to find any sort of goal onboarding, so maybe we'll just come up with that on our own or loop back to that at a later time. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's start diving in. Okay, perfect. So now in terms of inspiration is, again, we're going to need some type of goal card here. So like, let me just add a stroke on the outside, remove the fill. So I think this is where we can take some inspiration from this widget here. We might also want to add some additional features or functionality that sort of speak to them, at least like things like roundups or overflow, sort of different ways that they might be able to help you build out that goal. And I think like this here is kind of more in line with where we're going with our treatments, this page here, but we might also just take some inspiration just from things like invite your friends, progress, maybe setting up automatic transfers here at the bottom too, and also some quick actions towards this savings goal. Okay, so that's where we're going to draw a lot of the inspiration from now. Start designing. Okay, so right away, let's pull in one of our elements here because we can save ourselves some time. As we look at this the component that we had built a little bit earlier on, it's kind of similar to where we're going with it, right? Like this type of goal, how much you have done, how much you already have completed. So let's go ahead and to stay also consistent with what we've been doing before, let's go ahead and add in this little bar here that's savings goals. Okay, maybe we can keep that treatment for now, but we might revisit it a little bit later. And look at that. We're already like halfway through. Okay. Not actually, but you know what I mean. So let's just go ahead and let's just detach this. Maybe we'll just create another card, another component for like more savings goal specific. So we have, let's say maybe one of your goals is a new laptop. That's something I need. I need a new laptop. So you want to buy a new laptop. Let's swap out that icon for like a laptop. There we go. And let's play around with it here. So let's match their treatment very similar. So they kind of move it like this, where they have what's the end date that you want to achieve this goal by, like, when do I want a new laptop by like October 1st, 2025, no guarantees. And then they sort of have how much is already saved. So let's say how much is a new laptop these days, like $1,500. Let's say like $750, and then this is how much you have saved, and this could be like 1,500 Canadian. And I like their treatment here, how they sort of have it like a different style. So sort of like a text placeholder to signify like that's how much you haven't done. Oh, it looks like I didn't add properties on the original component, so forgive me there. This will be our heading, and these here will be our body. Okay, then you can also have an on track or an off track, or maybe it's just to spruce things up, is we can just add it this way. Come on. Let's hit the hug and hug. What's going on here? There we go. Hug and hug. So you can see if it's on track or off track, and then you might also want to swap this out for like a check or something. There we go. So you can see that it's on track. It's not the best treatment in the world, if I do say so myself. But we're going to roll with it for now. And then maybe to spruce things up too, very similar to how we had like some of the different colors. Maybe let's add some of those. Let's just detach this and just color match for now. Maybe we just want to add, some green or something in there. Okay. Where were we? Right here. Okay. So new laptop by October 1st. Maybe we want to set this to a slightly different shade. There we go. And I think we're in some decent shape. So we can go ahead, create the component of this, bring down that instance, and just move this in, and then move that out. Okay. But there's still some other elements that we might want to have. Things like roundups, other callouts, the ability to, invite your friends or set up net deposits. So now let's look at actually sprucing up this savings goal page. There we go. All right. Now let's work on sprucing it up. Okay. So pretty similar. I think there's some pieces we can take. So sort of this button that we had a little bit earlier on, we can position that underneath. Maybe be sure to set that to full width for something like add goal. Again, just make it stand out a little bit more. I don't know if they might have again, you could add a goal from this way. You can also add a goal from this way as well. But there's other things that we can also pull from some of the components that we built before. One of which was this insight, encouraging users to set up automatic transactions. Automatically link different elements to your goal, like that kind of thing. Automatically link your accounts to contribute to your savings goals. Okay. And be sure to also add sort of that effect with it too, which in this case is like that collective kit XL. What's going on here? Didn't look like it applied. So let's go ahead and do it again. I don't know if it's applying or not. It is applying. There we go. Sorry, I just had to click content on. Perfect. And also too, just from where we were before, be sure to set those radiuses to 12 and 12, as we didn't necessarily need that on the last item. Okay. Now, thinking about this kind of treatment is inside they sort of have one if you do have like a next deposit. So we can add a variant here to our main components and maybe just paste that inside and then set that to fill. And let me see this here so you can see some space. So in this case, there might be an automatic transaction coming into this goal. So what essentially that's saying is that maybe money is coming from an account to automatically fund this goal altogether. Okay, so what we can do is we can play around with this to make it stand out. We can get rid of that. Maybe we want to add a surface default subtle instead. Okay, and maybe we can swap this out for a little for our white, and also for our piggy bank savings. There we go. And then what's the copy that they have here? Next deposit, sept 15th. And then something like $35 or $28 will be to this goal from account automatically. There we go. Something like that. So it's just sort of letting the user know what's going on. So you can add a variant too, and then these variants, this can be our type. So this here will be our defaults, and then this here can be our deposit. One thing you might also want to do as an option is you can also just put this inside here and then add a layer property so it toggles on and off. So you would have the option to toggle that on and off, but maybe you just want to keep it as a variant for now, just as another option. Okay, so this is our new laptop. Maybe this is Dream Vacation. There we go. And we can swap this out for a plane. There we go. And then by when's the next vacation I'm taking? I think I'm going to Arizona in April. So April 15th, 2026. I think I'm going to need a lot more. So maybe let's say 3,000. And maybe I only have also $750 saved. Okay. So we have our goals here. So if we go back and let's just drag this down again, we're going to add some of our frames, some of like our bottom nav, and adjust the heights a little bit later on. Is one thing too, is that if a user actually does have multiple goals, this add goal is going to get pushed down. There is the option so that it's always static at the bottom, but I actually don't always really like that for treatment for some of those more key actions. So we're going to leave that as such for now. Okay. So maybe just to help take up some more space, maybe we have education, saving for a kid's education fund. This year is also on track. Let's swap this out for like a graduation cap. There we go. And let's say by September 1st, 2026, and maybe you might need, so I should say 3,000. Maybe you might need 20 grand for that. There we go. And also a deposit. Okay. So relatively in no time at all, we went from nothing to a half decent looking goals page. Next is look at that goal index page where you can see how much we're saving, any other details, maybe change that goal too. All right, I got some coffee. Tastes so good. Okay. So we're gonna take some inspiration from both of these. I'm so funny, aren't I? So I kind of like this at the top, but then I kind of like this. I kind of like this. I kind of like some other things here too. I kind of like this bar. Because again, like if we were to use this kind of bar also on the goals page, then on this exact card, then it's the exact same that they had before. So I think we can try to spruce it up a bit. So let's copy these. Let's call this our savings index. In savings index, and I'm almost starting to wonder is if similar to how we had for our transactions where these were full width, maybe this top part is full width, okay, just to offer different treatments, okay, whether or not you like it, whatever. So I think maybe what we can do is let's move this outside entirely, okay, so just basically just a let's get rid of the XL and let's just set this also to 0 and just start getting rid of some of the elements on the inside. And be sure to set this to fill. Again, just sort of adding sort of like that, prepping for that treatment. Now, also too, we can probably get rid of this if we want to, but I think if this part here is going to be white, what we can do is actually save ourselves a little bit of time by bringing that icon all the way out here and setting this to a chevron, sort of like a go back. Okay, so now you can see that we're using some of these elements that we had before in order to make our lives a little bit easier. Okay, so then we can just call this set this also to that default. And keep things a little bit consistent. And I think we're off to a good shape where this top part might be that full width. So right away, trying to recreate what they have is let's bring in this plane. Let's bring in this plane and let's just blow it up entirely. Let's put it to like 84 by 84. And let's also bring in some text here. So it can be maybe not travel this time. Let's actually maybe just do like a laptop or something. So that's our first goal. Something like 84. You know what? We will also do travel. Travel. There we go. Savings goal. You can add some additional padding here to offer some separation. So if we want to set it to like 48, where it is a little bit lower. And then also too, we can also bring in the same progress bar that we did have here. Okay. So one thing too is let's start getting rid of some of these elements just so we can start to visualize it a little bit better, what it might look like. And let's also add some padding down below too. Now, right away, we're missing some text here where similar to what they have, I almost wonder if we can just pivot it below, also add some auto layout between these items. And here we might want to say how many days are actually left. So if you're saving each day, saving each week, instead of the same values that we had here, we could also bake those in. But I kind of like what they do, where it's how many days are actually left in order to hit this goal. So it can be like 84 days left, 84 days remain. And then you might have a total here where it's like 750 out of 1500. And we can set this to just a little bit of a darker color. Now, personally, I think that this is a little bit too close remaining. This is a little bit too close to the edge. So we might want to add some like 18 pixel padding on either side to keep things nice and snug. And you can already see how that does look a little bit better. Okay. So I think we're in some decent shape. We might also want to add some color here too. So if we set this to surface success or icon success, I don't love it, but we're going to roll with it for now. Savings goals. And then also to how they have settings here, settings at the top right. What we might want to do is also just bring in like a settings icon. We can get rid of the old one that we had that was blank and just swap this for like a gear. Okay. So settings towards this specific goal. It's a pretty common treatment to see in types of financial, industries. Now, this is where we might want to break away from this page right here and maybe move to this page right here. And also bring in some transactions. So similar to how we had the quick actions on the dashboard, we might be able to actually bring these in here too, and play around with it. Maybe if we want to move it down below, I actually kind of like it down below. I think it does stand out a little bit better, but something here is just missing. So let's go ahead, maybe just invert as such. This is me just playing around with it. For now, how many days are missing? So let me take a quick break. Let me gather some inspiration and then we'll come back to it. Okay, so we're actually gonna make a pivot here. I just couldn't find a treatment that I liked, leveraging this sort of flat style at the top and with some other cards at the bottom. I just didn't think it fit into what we were doing before. Okay, so my apologies there, hands out. So what we can do is just copy another card. It's only going to take us a couple seconds to really fix things. Is just what we can do is select these elements that we had here, put them in an auto layout frame, copy, and then just paste in to the card itself. And then I think that's not too bad as it stands already. So one thing we can also try too is very similar to what we did on the dashboard is we can actually just paste this in. So, but we might want it to be a little bit different where it's more like fund goal, or withdraw funds. And we might also want to spread it out to something like 24. And we can set this to the quick action. So maybe I'll just attach the component. Maybe we'll just keep it as is for now. So you can withdraw those funds or also just fund that goal. Okay. So other things that we're going to want to do is some option for automatic transfers to show whether or not those automatic transfers are actually enabled. So With that, what we could do is copy down the card, and it looks like they actually have a switch here. Sorry, it looks like they it's kind of hidden a bit. So maybe let's loop back to Mobbin and see if we can reference what they're doing there. Okay, so I got some inspiration here just from Mobbin. Just I couldn't find the exact exact widget here, but just got some inspiration. Now, this is where you really need to think like a designer, because if you think about the context of what this is, like turning on and off your automatic contributions to this goal, how often will a user do that? Not often. So would we need a switch here for them to toggle that on and off? Not really. Or would it be better served tucked away inside some kind of settings? Probably, right? As long as the user knows that they have it enabled and can see when that next automatic deposit is, then that's really all the information that you need. You don't need interactions on every widget to do everything. You know, you can tuck away some of these elements inside of settings, inside like a profile, those kinds of pages too. So we're actually not even going to copy the direct treatment that we have here, because it just doesn't fit our use case. Okay, so thinking about what else could be useful for this page, one of which is sort of like invites, you know, your spouse or your friends. Like maybe you and your spouse are saving for some type of, you know, trip together. So I really like how what they have here. Let me bring this in. What they have here, this example, where sort of like invite your friends, save and achieve your goals together. So invite your friends, invite your partner or friends, save this goal together, save this goal, or keep track of progress together. It's also sort of a good lead generation source too. And like on the academy, I sort of talk about like what inbound marketing is, and like being able to speak the same language as your clients in terms of like a marketing approach goes a really long way to getting clients and all that kind of stuff. So then something like say or share goal, something like that. Okay. Now, one thing too you might want to do is just sort of shrink this to something like 40 and add some additional padding in between to something like 18. And then maybe swap this out for like a share icon. There we go. And then we can simply just paste this underneath. So one other thing that could also come in handy is to keep track of what's been deposited, like to this individual goal, what's been deposited, what's been withdrawn from this goal. So we can just take the transactions that we have, and again, keep it full width, so it's just inside of one of those frames to keep the same treatment that we had before. And then this can be all transactions. And what we can do is maybe just delete, or maybe you also might just even want to because it's sort of like goal contributions more than anything else. It's not necessarily deposits. So let's go ahead and just detach this. And we're going to create a new component of this where we call it goal contribution item. And what we're going to do is we're going to add in an icon for like up, like an upward arrow, and then a down. So like a downward arrow. So you're sort of seeing like what's been contributed, contribution, goal contribution, dates like September 15th, 2025. And how much was contributed. And then we can create the component of this and then add the variant and then just swap out the icon. So it's goal withdrawal, like maybe you took money out of this goal. There we go. And we can just bring these in here. Goal contribution, and then swap this out. Oops, I accidentally took the main component. Don't do that. We want to bring an instance of that component. So you might have one goal contribution, goal withdrawal, goal contribution. So just another treatment that you can explore. And maybe it's something like this week, right? And then you could, of course, duplicate this. Last week. That's another good, use case to use the same components and treatments that we already had on this page itself. Okay. So I think we're in some pretty good shape. We have some good inspiration that we took from here. We'll just bring those, move those back up there along with this as well. So we have our inspiration. Again, always save your inspiration screens. So we also have some new components. So now I think what we can do is we can maybe start looking at refining some of these elements to improve sort of the visual elements and also add in that bottom nav. So if we think about these cards here, like these are all like sort of rounded cards. So maybe it makes sense to also have these pop-up modals also rounded, very similar to this Revolut example that we have here. So maybe what we want to do is also just maybe set this to 12 and 12, and then these also like a 12 and also a 12 to keep them nice and rounded, again, in consistency with what we have for a lot of those cards and those borders. Now, this is where it can get a little bit tricky because, we want to keep, like we kind of need to add an outer bounding box around the frame and then reapply the interaction. So because we look here, it sort of have this bounding box around the frame. So if we maybe set it to 24 by 24 horizontally and then like 64 by 64 vertically, because if you think about it, like there's a little bit more space on the bottom. Let's see what this looks like. Okay. And we're not going to add a fill. So for this, we're simply going to redirect it to this outer frame, but doing the same thing. So move in and close and clicking outside, background. Yep, that works. And let's go ahead and let's preview it. So if I choose to add a category, or that didn't work too well, did it? So where is this interaction? So this should be from the bottom center this time. But there's also one thing that I noticed too is like currently, because our frame is too wide. So if I preview this again, you're going to see what I mean. So if I choose to hit add category, notice how it comes up, but it still goes edge to edge, which makes it look a little bit weird. So what we need to do is we actually need to shrink everything in and then set this to fill. Set this to fill. And also, oops, looks like we had some mistakes here. What's going on with this? Where is this in our layers? Let's check it out. Set this to fill. Not too sure what's going on with that. Paste inside. There we go. This is set to fill. This is set to fill. So if we add these in an auto layout frame and then set these to going horizontally, I think that works, but there's still something wrong here. There we go. Sorry, I had to play around with that. So now we can see that there's that space around it. So if we were to preview this now, add category, notice how it comes up. Maybe we still want to extend it out a little bit. So what we can do is if we add our rulers here, we can sort of see where that frame should go. There we go, in order to keep it consistent. So with this, we're just going to maybe set it to 22 or by 20, maybe even 18. Keep things in line. Okay, perfect. So set that to 18. And maybe we can even reduce the space on the bottom and also the top. And let's preview this. Add category. And you can see how it comes up as such. And you might also even want to reduce this even more. Okay, so something like 24 by 24. And then we can preview this, add category, and see how it comes up nicely. Okay, so there's a little bit of a different treatment that you can add, still keeping in line with like that card feel. And then we can go ahead and we can just do the same for this one as well here. So let's check the members. Let's be like add budget category. And so 1824, add some auto layout again, and then set this to 18, and then also 24. And then again, just reset this so it comes out to this frame instead. Sorry, I'll move this up. Close and clicking from the background, move in from the bottom center. There we go. Okay. So one thing too, I don't know where that's coming from, but we're gonna pretend as if I knew exactly where that was coming from. But looking at this, I think maybe it like this just doesn't really fit my style in a way. So I might just like remove just sort of the icon and just sort of clean. I think it just sort of cleans it out a bit. I think the icon just sort of gets in the way. If looking at it too, again, just to be consistent, like we don't really use like the purple buttons anywhere, although it's kind of like a nice shout. Like it's not something that we really do. So we might just want to maybe just tweak these buttons actually, wherever the main component is, to our surface defaults, or surface, primary default, our text on color body still works. And this one can be our surface, default subtle, and this can be our text, on color subtle. There we go. So now when we go back here, I think just a little bit more in line with what we've been doing before. Although color is nice, and then this can become our text headings. Okay, so just clean it up, keep things simple, keep things consistent with the colors that we've been using before. And this is adjust budget. Beautiful. Okay, so I think we're in some good shape. So there's still a couple of things that we need to clean up. Like if we go back and look at some of our components, we don't want to deliver a file that has components like this. And I'm pretty sure we're missing some styles as well. Maybe some styles and variables are properly applied. Before we do that, again, let's focus on that bottom nav. So if we look at our frame here, so we're using a 440 by 956. So what we're going to want to do now, this is just my personal preference, is that whenever you're working on dashboard pages like this, if we were to extend this up, okay, to that 956, wherever it is, 956, okay, and we were to add one of the elements on here, like the bottom nav, right, and then data starts to get cut off. And I always like things to be pretty realistic. I've seen a couple instances where there are designs that are super long and the bottom nav is just at the bottom and it's just set to scroll with the parent with stay at the bottom. I think it's just too confusing, too complex. So what I'm showing you here is just my personal preference. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create components of these core pages. Okay, maybe not savings goal, because we're going to assume that maybe the savings index page does not have a bottom nav with it. So if we think about our bottom nav, we're going to have dashboard, transactions, budget, and then also saving goal. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and create the component of each of these. Create multiple components. I'm not going to combine them as variants. I'm just going to create multiple components. So then we sort of have our core, pages here that we can always come back and reference to a little bit later on. Whereas in the actual design file itself, it might also have, in the actual prototype file, it's going to have the bottom navigation. You know what? I'm actually going to create components of these as well. Create the component set. Again, individual components. Again, just best practice. So I don't know why I did not do that before. But so now, whenever on the actual prototype itself, okay, where if I bring these down, and I set each of the heights to 956, okay? And then I'm going to select clip content for each of these. And this should be a little bit larger, so we can fix that. No problem. There we go. Okay. So now I have clip content on. So let's say we have that bottom navigation now just on this one here. But if I need to go back and make a change, I no longer need to spread this out. I can just go back here and make the change that's needed. It's just how I set things up. There are other ways to do it, and not to say that this is absolutely the right one, but it saves me some time. So then we just go ahead and we frame these. Frame selection, frame selection, frame selection, frame selection. Again, this is going to be our dashboard. This here is going to be our transactions. This is going to be our budget. This is going to be our goals, insights, and also goals index. Okay, so spelled transactions wrong. So that's how I go about setting things up prior to adding that bottom nav. So now also the bottom nav, it's kind of a funky one because there's no more than one way to set it up. So I'm just going to search for a home icon if it decides to load. Home, I'm going to set it to round. I just like it rounded. So 24 by 24, that's fine. So what we're going to do is we're just going to add a tab underneath. That's just going to call it home. Home, it's way too large as is. We're going to set that to like a smaller size by like regular, something like that, and set it to our body, text body. And we can set this also a little bit larger. It's like 36. Oops, what did I do? Oh, I set the opacity at 36 by 36. Okay, so we can make it a little bit larger. Now, as I said before, there's more than one way that you can set these things up. Okay, I've seen it done a bunch of different ways. There's really no best practice in terms of like, this is absolutely the way it needs to be done. But one thing too, we just want to gauge sizing a little bit. So I'm just going to put this over top here and then paste this in and just see roughly the size that we're going to want. So I think maybe we're going to need to reduce the padding in between. So let's set this to like 4, and we can reduce it to like 4 as well. I think that's decent. This also might want to be set to like a body medium regular to give ourselves some additional space. This is set to 36 by 36. Maybe we'll go 30 by 30. Again, it's not usually a variable that I use, but you get the picture. Okay, so I think that's half decent. So one thing too is I'm going to want to play around with, excuse me. So semi-bold, and then this here might, if we switch this back to our outlined, and we have our filled. Yeah, so I think maybe we'll do an outlined and a filled. Outline and then also filled, sort of to signify which nav item we're on. Again, it's not going to be like the best looking nav item in the world, just because our component set might not match sort of like our look and feel that we have for the app, but it is what it is. Okay, so maybe what we could do actually is the selected ones are actually green, because we do have some green floating around in some places, so maybe we'll roll with that actually. So what we're going to do, so the selected ones are going to be green. So what we do, and what there's a practice that you can do here, is with for every single one of your items that's going to be in the bottom navigation, what you can do is you have the selected version of it. So this is going to be your icon success defaults, and then this here can also become our text success defaults. And so one is going to be our type. So this is our defaults, our unselected. And then this here is going to be our selected. Okay. So then we can just duplicate this really. So we have transactions. It's going to be a long one. Transactions. And we'll swap these out for like money. Yeah, money. I don't know, something like that's fine. So this is going to be our transactions. And then we also have our budget. This here is our budget, where these here become like a bank or piggy savings. There we go. And then lastly, we have our goals. And we'll look for like a target icon. Radar. Kind of looks like a goal piece. Okay, so then what we do is we can bring down one of these, and then also one of these. With me so far? Let's add some auto layout between them instead of like something like 24 by 24. And we can move our componentry out of the way here. Okay, and we just want to gauge what the look and feel is in case we need to shrink this down. Okay, so maybe if we set this to 12 by 12 or even 4 by 4, I think that's good. I think they're just a little bit big, if I'm honest. So this is where we can start to play around with some of the sizing here. So instead of our body medium, we could also set this to like our body small, medium. And notice how that gives it a little bit of a tighter feel. And then I think that's pretty good. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add some auto layout here, like 24, and then like 8. And we're going to add a fill in the back. So then this here is going to serve as a foundation for our nav bar. So let's create the component of this, move this up, bring this in. And I think that actually looks pretty good. I'm almost wondering if we can even spread these out a little bit by reducing the padding to something like 12. And I think that's not a half bad nav bar. One thing we might also want to explore is also adding an effect, a slight effect to it, so you can see it sort of stands out very slightly. And even also, so that should be our surface defaults, and even also a stroke just on the top there, which is going to be our border default. Okay, so it's not a bad treatment, I don't think. It sort of stands out. I think it does the job relatively well. Now, this is where we need to add in some variants here. So I always add in a variant for each of the bottom nav items that I have, but one is selected and one is not. So this is going to be selected and this is going to be unselected. This here is going to be selected and then this here is going to be unselected. This here is going to be selected and then this here is going to be unselected. Okay, so then what I do is I select each of the home items here and then I prototype it. So essentially what this is saying is that whenever home is selected, you're going to go to the dashboard. Whenever transactions is selected, oops, I got to select all. Whenever transactions is selected, you're going to go to the transactions page. Whenever budget is selected, you're going to go to the budget page. And whenever goals is selected, or sorry, this should say not budget, but goals. Sorry, thanks for calling me out behind the scenes. So this is our goals. And then this here is our goals. There we go. So whenever goals is selected, we're going to go to the goals page. So really that simple at the end of the day. So then what I do, again, set on the prototype, instead of scroll with parent, it's going to stay in place. So then what we do is we copy all these, just copy it here, paste here, and then change the variants, which will change the names in just a sec. And then paste it in. Again, this is one of many ways that you can set this up. Okay, there's no right way, there's no wrong way. We're going to have our type and just which one is selected here in the variants. So home, transactions, budget, and then you have your goals. Okay, just like that. So nice and simple. Small things too. This, whatever prototype, on click, just set this to back, and then also for this as well, on click, just back. Okay, and I don't know where this goal button is fun goal is going, so we're just going to remove that for now. Okay, so still a couple things that we're going to need to do specific to the prototype here, because if I check the transactions, notice how it doesn't scroll. So we need to play around with that. So the reason why this is happening, so we set our prototype, the overflow is set to no scrolling. So we set that to vertical, still nothing happens. Now, the reason why nothing happens is because we need to select the transactions element in the dashboard and see how it's set to scroll with parent and also no scrolling, but we can't select no scrolling yet. So what we actually need to do on the main components, okay, is we're actually going to set this to something like 956. So there's going to be a little bit of overflow there, which is exactly what we want to see. So now the overflow, instead of setting it to no scrolling, we set it to vertical. So now I can scroll. Okay, so if you're ever running into that issue, same with the dashboard as well. It looks like I already did that. Set that to vertical. Again, 956. Prototype vertical scroll, 956, prototype vertical scrolling. Something happened there. I'm not too sure what happened there when I did that. Let me check. This is also set to 956. Yeah, I think it's fine. Whatever. I'll figure it out. Everything should be fine. Yeah, see it there and it corrects itself. And again, just make sure that those are set to vertical so that they scroll accordingly as such. Now, one thing you're going to realize here also too is that even when it is set to scroll, if your page doesn't go so far, stuff still may get covered by that bottom nav. So what you can do is just give yourself a little bit of breathing room. So now on the budget, I can scroll past and still see the elements beneath it. So you need to account for that bottom navigation in your structure. Again, only if you're doing it this way. There are other ways that you can set this up. This is just my own personal way of doing it, where I have the components, I have everything else with the sidebar. It just helps me visualize things just a little bit better. Again, there are other ways to do this. No right or wrong answer here. Okay, so I want to start to organize this page before we go through and tweak some of just the minor adjustments and minor elements before we go to hand this off. So one thing we do, we just get rid of the screenshots we had from Chat GPT before. We just start to organize our components a little bit. Okay, we're gonna organize it. I'm gonna organize these off camera, so you don't need to watch me organize them. But one thing I always do here, we can also get rid of that before, is sort of group these out. Okay, similar to how we have here. This here can all be categorized in terms of like a research. Okay, so this section here can just be like something like research. This is really good for if you're handing this off to a client where they can see the research and inspiration that you got and that you pulled from. Okay, maybe if you did like copy the widgets one by one, like you don't want to do this, but to be able to reference the screenshots and iterations, sometimes it helps for your clients to see, but also too at the same time, maybe you don't want them to see that. So you can have your research here, and we're going to have our component tree. So as I said a little bit earlier on, is I'm going to organize these components off camera. So you don't need to watch me do that. And we can also too sort of how we have our components, and then we have our page level components. So these here are page level components. Page level components. Again, the arguments to be made about whether or not you need those. And then what I also do is I have one other file. It can be file, it can be your own page, depending on how you want to hand things off to your client. We're just going to put it all within one for now for the prototype. Okay? And this is where that prototype is going to start. So this is going to be prototype flow. Prototype, make sure there's no other flows kicking around. There we go. So then you have your prototype flow. We can also get rid of our guide as well. Now, one thing that's important for us to do is we need to make sure that all of our components have the necessary variables applied. Again, for some of the edge case colors, we're just going to ignore that. But we need to make sure that there's no missing, let's again start to get rid of some of these. There's no missing variables. So it looks like all our variables are applied here. For the most part, our variables are applied here. We'll leave that as the green for now. This here doesn't appear to be applied. So let's see where this item is. Okay, so the background, this should be a surface default. So always go through and make sure you have your variables applied to your specific components. So, and that also goes not just for colors, but also for things like your text as well. Like if we were to look at this, I need to go through all my components and audit to make sure that I didn't leave that out anywhere. Because sometimes when, we're designing very fast, we don't always have the luxury in order to actually make sure that all our variables or styles are applied. And especially if we're working individually and not part of a group, those kinds of things can kind of get lost in the weeds a little bit. So it's super important to go through all your components and do that before any handoff. So now this is where you can go through and really just go through and like polish everything, make sure every use case is covered. Okay. So in this case here, like let's be sure to set this to fill. So it takes the full width of that container, gives it that like sort of great polish. And again, this is where you go through. Like one of the things that you tend to miss out on when you're going through and doing this are specific needs for specific filters. Okay. Like if you look at this insights page as an example, it doesn't tell you for how long these insights are based off of, right? So what you can maybe do is add in like we had it somewhere here. Sorry, take a quick scan through. Or whatever. What we'll do is we'll just add in. So let's go with like a chevron. Chevron. Heck, I shouldn't do it, but I'm just gonna grab one and just rotate it. It's not best practice, so don't do that. But I am a rule breaker, so and just sort of have like June. Add some auto layout here, hug this. Again, this should really be a component because you can have different treatments for this around like if it's open or closed, and sort of have like a date selector, date selector, where you can sort of see like what those insights would be, right? So if we go back to our main component, then one thing you might want to do is just place this in, or this is also a component. Look at me go. You might just want to paste this in and just absolute position this in a specific place where a user would have the option to select, if it's from June or when, right? So it's that kind of thing that we can do. Also absolute position this, move it in the same place, rough position. Again, if you had more time, you can absolutely make sure it was aligned. There we go. So you can sort of see like the different months that it's in. Again, make sure things are aligned as best as you possibly can. Sometimes I know it's hard to get it perfect. There we go. Something like that works just fine. Okay. So we're in some half decent shape now. Just checking what's going on. So if we look at it, I can see that we sort of have the date picker there that you usually be able to select through. Again, those are the kinds of things that you're going to want to check and look for to make sure that you have all the necessary filters applied and things ultimately make sense. Okay. So also too, whenever you're delivering something to a client, go through and actually check. What I mean by like, make sure the content matches, and always make sure, just to make your life a little bit easier, add a text property for all the specific values if it's needed, right? So you can add sort of the text property here for like amount. So now when I go back to like whatever that main component is, inside of these, I'd be able to easily change that. So let's say this is something to like 2,000 or to 20,000. 20,000, and we can even just remove that. So make the numbers a little bit more realistic, where it's like, 450, auto and transport. I don't have a car, but like, let's say 500. Groceries, let's say 450 or 250. It's cheap for groceries these days. Recreation, I think I pay like 50 for a gym. Family care, I don't have kids, so like let's say like 150, I have no idea. And then coffee, oh god, I just spent a lot on coffee. Let's just say 1,000 just for jokes. Okay, so always make sure that you also do have those text properties applied. I know I didn't necessarily do that on the go, because sometimes what I do whenever I'm building components is I usually add them actually at the end, because then I know that that component is absolutely finalized. So it's a small thing that goes a really long way to helping your prototype actually come to life for people looking at it. Now, also too, with some of these, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Bottom navigations with the phones, how they're rounded. Notice how sometimes it gets cut off. So what you're going to have to do is go back to that main component and make some adjustments. It looks like we needed a little bit more space in the bottom. So on each of these, what we can do is just add space padding on the bottom. Let's say like 16. And if we go back to app build, and it looked like it reset. And the reason why is just position this always at the bottom. Let's check that. Yeah, so it looks like it gave us like a little bit more space there. So again, always make sure that that's like, always do some checks when it comes to sort of like that bottom navigation to make sure everything fits in seamlessly. And there you go, my friends. I know it was a little bit messy. It was a little bit chaotic, but like, hey, that's part of designing. Like, we went from zero to all this great research that we can showcase in a PowerPoint deck or to a client. These great components, again, they're not perfect, but again, designing fast on the fly, our page level components, and also a prototype in just under 3.5 hours. So we'll take it. Let's rock and roll. See you at the next one.